you don't want this smoke, I'm back. Had to get up on my grind, had to go up in that bag, had to elevate my mind. This ain't personal, family, but it's a competition. I'ma praise the Most High while I spit this demolition. Too bad you had to face me, you drew the short stick, but we can link up after this and hit the script real quick. You can have a fan vote, I know my style unique. I'm lifting up these bars to build lyrical physique. Let's edify the masses, bringing truth to their ears, but only one of us advancing, and it's the one spitting here. Big props to the Akabaya, cause we all got exposure, but only one of us gon' win, and I'm sorry, but it's over.
Alright, so it's down to Malak Karash.
Shabbat Shalom, family. It's your boy Solemn Prophet here with Professor S, and this is Shabbat Talk. Once again, we have a full house. Unfortunately, Tess and Cindy couldn't be here, but everybody that's normally here is going to be in here. Sister Jasmine will be coming in shortly, but we got Sister Marquita here with the whole group back there. They all using her Zoom, so unfortunately, I can't call them all out by name and give them their shout outs, but I appreciate all of them for being here. Sister Jasmine just came in here, and you already know. We got Brother Allen in here from Spain. This brother is with us. What's it, like 2 a.m. over there right now?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah. So he's staying up late to
Well,
stay with us.
one.
So I appreciate him.
1:24 to be precise in the so-called time that we use with the Gregorian calendar.
So it's like almost 1:30 a.m. where he's at right now over in Spain. So glad to have him. I appreciate you for staying up to join us, because the time difference is crazy. I understand your pain. I'd have been overseas before trying to do some of the festivities and events of stateside, and it don't always work out. So I appreciate you being here. And Professor S, you want to go ahead and tell the people what we're going to be doing?
Yeah, so today we're going to be going over Galatians chapter 5. Apparently, Solemn Prophet has a lot of references from Acts as well that I was not privy to in advance, but so much the better, right? So yeah, we'll be going through Galatians chapter 5 and breaking it down, demonstrating that Paul was not against the Torah, but rather upheld the Torah.
Absolutely. I do apologize, everybody. Tonight will be a longer Shabbat talk. Going through Galatians chapter 5, it was impossible to go through it without having other scriptural references. So we will be hitting a lot of Acts and touching in some Romans, and then we will be going through the whole chapter verse by verse. So at any given time, if you need to go because it's getting late on your end and you got work and stuff in the morning, we understand. But we're gonna get on right into it. So I always give this before we cover Paul, right? I call it the blueprint to understanding his epistles. So you got to understand 5 things. First is you substitute the word sin for its biblical definition that's found in 1 John chapter 3 and verse 4. Sin is a transgression of the law of the Torah. For those of you guys who do not know the Torah or not familiar with that terminology, it is what it's also called the law of Moses, right? But Moses gave it to us, but he received it from the Most High himself. So I kind of shy away from trying to associate it with the law of Moses, even though, I think that just gives it a little bit of I don't know. It tries to demote its meaning and its when you call it the law of Moses.
It's like they degrade it and say, "Oh, it's the law of Moses. It's not the law of God, right? Oh, it's the law of Moses."
Yeah, exactly. So
but it just came through Moses, so that's why it's referred to as such in Scripture sometimes, because it was given to Moses and then Moses disseminated it to the people. So.
Didn't the first set of tablets get smashed on Mount Sinai, the ones that Yah inscribed with his finger?
They did.
Yeah.
Where they made a blue sapphire or something, gemstones, and they put it in the Ark of the Covenant.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So that's first, substitute sin. Also substitute law. You got to figure out what law Paul is talking about whenever you read him say the word law, okay? Because he's not always talking about the law of Moses, right? He's also talking about other different laws. It just depends on the epistle that you're in and what the context is. Understand Paul's viewpoint. This is important, and this is what we're going to really be hitting hard today when we go into the book of Acts. It's important that we understand Paul's viewpoint when we're reading his epistles, because if you're reading his epistles and you're in agreement that Paul taught against the Torah, right, then his epistles is going to read a certain way for you. But if you're in agreement that Paul did not teach against the Torah and actually upheld and kept the Torah, guarded the Torah, then when you read his epistles, it's going to give you the correct context and understanding of what he was actually saying in those letters. Number 4, ask the question, what does Paul mean by saying whatever he's saying, right? If you ask that question, it'll force your brain to kind of key in to the deeper meaning of whatever it is that you're reading. And then number 5 is always go back to the whole duty of man. And that is in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13, not chapter 13. I misquoted it last week, so I want to clarify that. And that is the whole duty of man is to love the Most High and keep his commandments, not Moses' commandments, his commandments. So as you can see, we got a lot to cover tonight. A lot of this is going to be quick. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. I'm just going to be hitting certain points. But by all means, each of these verses that we're going to cover, feel free to read the entire chapter on your own. And if you have any questions, feel free to hit us up. So I hope everybody can see my screen.
Yep.
All right. So we're in Galatians chapter 5. However, I want to talk about Paul's viewpoint. Okay. And the only way to get Paul's viewpoint is to go to Paul himself, right? And hear his own words and see, what was happening to Paul. So it's a few of these examples is just going to show that Paul himself was actually upholding the Torah. And then the rest of these examples are going to show Paul speaking for himself, because in the book of Acts, he was actually put on trial for and the accusation that was against him is the same accusation that's against him today. Now, in some cases, if you're in agreement that he taught against the Torah, it's not an accusation. It's more of a fortification. But it was indeed an accusation because he had to testify. And
what did he testify? We will get into as well, I'm sure.
Exactly. Professor S, if there were some ones in Acts that like you feel like we have to absolutely have that I missed, just let me know. We'll go and hit those too. I literally did this in like the last hour just to make sure we had some reference points. So this is Acts 13, and I'm progressively going through Acts, right? So this is Acts 13, verses 13 through 16. It says, now when Paul and his company loosed from Paphos, they came to Perga and Pamphylia, and John departed from them, returned to Jerusalem. But when they departed from Perga, they came to Antioch and Pisidia and went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and sat down. The Sabbath day. And after
why would
go ahead.
Just to interject here, if Paul was against keeping the Sabbath and against keeping the Torah, why would he be going into the synagogue on the Sabbath day? Right?
Exactly. And after the reading of the law and the prophets, the rulers of the synagogue sent unto them, saying, ye men and brethren, if ye have any word of exhortation for the people, say on. Then Paul stood up and beckoning with his hand said, men of Israel, and ye that fear Elohim, or the Most High, give audience. And then it goes on, but we don't have to get into all of that. But basically what we're confirming here is, one, it was on the Sabbath day. You've seen Paul and his people in the synagogue, right, observing Sabbath. And then if one would say, well, just because it was the Sabbath day and he was in the synagogue, that doesn't mean that he was really participating and observing. That's why I put these right here, verses 15 and 16, where they said, like, if anybody got some words of exhortation, any uplifting words, any wisdom to share with the people, go ahead and say it. And Paul stood up, right? So Paul stood up. That shows participation, that shows observance, that shows that he was there on the Sabbath. So that's that one, Acts 13. Now, later in that same chapter, you have it here in verse 42 through 44. And when the Jews were gone out of the synagogue, the Gentiles besought that these words might be preached to them next Sabbath. Okay, so even the Gentiles were looking into what was shared and was looking forward to the next Sabbath to get more of these words, more of that wisdom that was coming out. Now, when the congregation was broken up, many of the Jews and religious proselytes followed Paul and Barnabas, who, speaking to them, persuaded them to continue in the grace of the Most High. And the next Sabbath day came almost the whole city together to hear the word of Elohim. Now, again, we see it. Sabbath upon Sabbath upon Sabbath. This has become routine at this point, right? So did Paul keep the Sabbath? Observing the Sabbath is one of the first instructions in the entire Torah. For 6 days thou shalt work and do all of their work and all of their burdens, but on the seventh day, which is the Sabbath, thou shalt rest. Okay, thou shalt do no work. Okay. Now, Acts 15, and certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren and said, except ye be circumcised after the manner of Moses, ye cannot be saved. Now, we went over this a little bit last week, so I'm not going to hit this too hard, but I want to point out what I was saying last week, because there was a certain group of men that were saying that in order for you to be saved, you had to be circumcised. You had to keep all of the law, statutes, commandments. But what they were doing was they were taking the law and their own traditions, adding it to the law and making everything mandatory. And then they were saying it was your salvation was dependent on it, right? And in a way we can confirm this is if we scroll down, verse 5, it says, but there rose up certain of the sect of the Pharisees which believed, saying that it was needful to circumcise them and to command them to keep the law of Moses. This doesn't cover every single person who kept the Torah during that time period. This covers specifically a certain of the sect of Pharisees. A sect is just like a small group that is a part of a larger group. If you are all, I don't know, members of the NAACP, but there's a smaller branch of the NAACP that deals with like education specifically, you are a part of the sect of the education of the NAACP. So a lot of times when people read the words of Paul, they assert all of this, right, to everybody that was there. No, that's not the case. And the Bible doesn't speak that. So, this is where Peter rises up, and this is when they told the Gentiles that, once you're converted and you believe on the Messiah, you receive the Holy Spirit, this is the things that you have to keep, right? And so they were starting them off. Now, the argument was those 4 different instructions, right? And those 4 instructions were, hold on one second.
If I may add something real fast,
yeah, go ahead.
When you find that, circumcision of the heart is far more important than circumcision of the flesh, because you could circumcise your flesh and your heart still be uncircumcised. But if your heart is circumcised, then that's really what makes the difference, right? And we can see that even through the Torah in Deuteronomy, repeatedly, the Most High says, circumcise the foreskin of your heart, right? He said it in Jeremiah as well. It's not about the carnal, it's about the spiritual.
Absolutely. So verse 20, it tells them, but that we write unto them that they abstain from pollution of idols and from fornication and from things strangled and from blood. Those were the 4 things that they needed to start with. All right. It's the reason why they did it. The first reason is without those, if they were participating in those things, the elders would not let them into the synagogue. They would be considered unclean, defiled. They wouldn't give them access. The second reason is because they were going to start there, right? And you got to crawl before you walk. And then they were going to study the Torah and learn more of the Torah as time progressed. The intention was for them to always keep the Torah, but you can't expect people who had no background in the Torah to then accept Messiah and then instantly become masters of the Torah. It don't work like that, because, you know, we said this last week, but Hebrew citizens, now I ain't talking about Pharisees, teachers of the laws, priests, or anything like that. Just your average citizen had to memorize the Torah by the age of 12. The first 5 books of the Bible, they had to have memorized by the age of 12. So even your average citizen had a firm understanding of the Torah. Then it only increased after that when you go into like the Pharisees and the teachers of the law and the Sadducees and all of those different groups. They were more studied in the Torah, but your average. So now you got this group of people who are well versed in the Torah trying to force all of these laws that these people who've never experienced a background like that. They didn't have the Torah, and some of these people were adults. So if you were a 35-year-old male and you just accept the Messiah, you happy, you know what I'm saying? You overflowing with joy because you're serving the Most High. And then these group says, and then they bring this big book and just drop it in your face like, boom, all right, now you got to keep all of these. You got to keep all of this. You don't know none of this. But if they say, hey, don't worry, you're going to get to all of this eventually, right? Take your time. But here's 4 things that you got to start with now, right? And the reason why we know this is because the next verse, it says, for Moses of old time hath in every city them that preach him, being read in the synagogues every Sabbath day. So
and the implication there is that the newly converted Gentiles would be going to the synagogue on the Sabbath day.
But it don't say that specifically.
In accordance with the commandment.
It don't say that specifically, right? But here's the thing, though. Why would they say that the Torah, or for Moses of old time hath in every city? Why would they mention every city that the Gentiles is in? Why would they mention that? Right? Come on now, what's understood don't have to be said. But let's just go, because we know that one group was like, no, the Gentiles have to keep the whole law. And the other group was like, the Gentiles shouldn't be forced to keep the law, like you guys know. And then Peter came to, you know, be the mediator, right? To come to a compromise, right? And so the compromise was the 4 things. But then guess what? After he said that, right, it says, then pleased it the apostles and the elders with the whole church. So we know that everything from verse 20 to verse 22 was dealing with the Gentiles, because Peter made the suggestion that pleased the elders and the apostles, right? So we know all of this was applied. So we go, Acts chapter 15 is definitely one to go into, but I just want to touch on that one part. Now, this is Acts 16, verses 13 through 17. And on the Sabbath, we went out of the city by a riverside where prayer was wont to be made, and we sat down and we spoke unto the women which resorted thither. And a certain woman named Lydia, a seller of purple of the city of Thyatira, I don't know how to say it, which worshiped the Most High, heard us, whose heart the Most High opened, that she attended unto the things which were spoken of Paul. And when she was baptized in her household, she besought us, saying, if ye have judged me to be faithful to the Most High, come into my house and abide there. And she constrained us, and it came to pass, as we went to prayer, a certain damsel possessed with the spirit of divination met us, which brought her masters much gain by soothsaying. The same followed Paul and us, and cried, saying, these men are servants of the Most High, which show unto us the way of salvation. So this is all showing that on the Sabbath, they were doing ministry. They were helping people. They were praying for people. They were casting out demons. They were doing all types of things on the Sabbath day. Again, the Sabbath day is the point here. Chapter 17, verses 1 and 2. Now, when they had passed through, I ain't even gonna try to attempt that, and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where was a synagogue of the Jews. And Paul, as his manner was, went in unto them, and 3 Sabbath days reasoned with them out of the scriptures. Now, again, Sabbath day, Paul went in, reasoned with them. To reason with somebody, we talking about ancient Israel here, okay? Ancient Israel.
As was his custom, which would be a different way of saying it, as his manner was, as was his custom. Now, if his custom was to go into the synagogue on the Sabbath day, then that means it's something he did regularly. Now, if it was not something we were supposed to do, then why would he be doing it regularly?
Right.
Okay,
And then another thing.
Hakeem.
Yeah.
So to answer that question, this is what many people would say, and I'd like you to address it. They would say how Paul said, I come to all men, I come to the Gentiles to gain the Gentiles, I come to the Jews to gain the Jews, right?
Come to the Jew as a Jew, come to the Greek as a Greek, yeah.
Right. So the argument I would presume would be, well, Paul went into the synagogue or went among these people to try to bring them out of keeping the law and spreading the gospel. Right. So,
and that's a great question.
I imagine there's a lot of people that's watching this would be saying that that's why he went in there. So the question is, what was he preaching as well?
Gotcha.
Okay.
And that is what we've been covering since Galatians 1, even before that, right? But basically, Paul was continuing, right? He was continuing the Messiah's ministry. Now, his focus, right, was on preaching the gospel to the Gentiles, right? And that includes Gentiles who were not Israelites and were foreign, right? Your Greeks, your Romans, all of the other people who weren't bloodline Israelites. But he was also preaching to Gentiles who were Israelites, who lived in Gentile nations, who basically was separated so long from the culture of Hebrew that they began to assimilate within those pagan countries. So he was bringing those individuals back, but he was also preaching the gospel to those who had never heard the gospel before. So that was Paul's ministry. Now, in doing that, right, there were people who were holding on to what's called the old ways. And the old ways was keep it within Israel. Don't deal with all of these other people or these outside nations. And then when it came to the revelation that the Most High intended for the Gentiles to be saved, Acts chapter 10, with Peter and Cornelius, they still resisted that. And they were trying to make it as difficult as possible for the Gentiles to be able to come into the fold, right? They were like, okay, this is, if it's divine intervention, then okay, cool. We can't argue with that. But if you're going to be a part of us, you got to do X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z.
And keep the whole Torah.
And that's not what the original intent was. Yes, people were circumcised of the flesh. However, and I'm going to get into this, is the law of Moses, law of the Most High, Torah, whatever you want to call it. It was always spiritual. It was always internal. It was always kept with faith and with the understanding that doing all of these things is a reflection from the love that you have for the Most High. It wasn't a checklist to check the box to be able to be admitted into heaven when you die, right? And so Paul was teaching that, but he was running into the issue of those who were not only opposing him in his ministry, but also was opposing and casting burdens down on the people whom he taught. So Paul would come to an area, he would preach the gospel, he would tell them, believe in the Messiah, have faith, you have grace. And, yes, there's the law, but,
the Pharisees come down and say, what about this?
And then he would leave and go to the next area to preach the gospel. And after he leaves, the Pharisees, well, not all of the Pharisees, but a certain sect, right? Acts chapter 15, they will come and be like, y'all ain't doing what y'all supposed to be doing. You supposed to be keeping the whole law. And the Gentiles, newly converts, right, mind you, they were like, man, this is too hard. This is too difficult. Like, why do we got to do all of this just to have a relationship with the Most High? And so he was having to double back
because it's incremental. As you grow in your relationship with him, you're going to do more and more things. It wasn't that Paul was saying you don't have to do that. He's saying just focus on this for now, and as you grow, then more will come, right?
Exactly. Now, another thing I wanted to mention really quick on verse 2, right? As his custom was. So for the people who are saying, well, Paul just came into the synagogue because he was trying to come to the Jew as a Jew, right? Paul also said in his own words that he kept the Torah. He didn't go against the Torah. And he said that he was an Israelite. And we know that he was a Pharisee.
Only doing this, and if he was only doing this for the sake of converting these particular Jews in the synagogue, then it would not have been his custom to do that. It would have been an exception.
And like me personally, right? I've been a Christian, I've been a Hebrew Israelite, and I'm neither now, right? But I can go to a Christian as a Christian because I understand that perspective, and I can relate to their viewpoint to help give them the understanding of what the Bible actually is talking about. And I can go to a Hebrew Israelite because I understand their perspective, and I can bring them to the scriptures to give them what the Bible is actually saying, not what the doctrines of each are telling them, right? So I go to the Hebrew Israelite as a Hebrew Israelite, and I go to the Christian as a Christian, but I'm neither, and I'm not gonna make it seem like that's who I am. No, I have removed myself from the religious constraints of doctrine, and I just follow the scriptures, right? So it's my custom to adhere to the book, but if I'm dealing with someone, I'm going to meet them where they are to help them get to the understanding. And that's what Paul is doing. He'll go to a Jew as a Jew because he is a Jew, so he has that relation, and he can relate with them and help them get to understanding that you have to believe on Messiah because the only way to get to the Father is through the Son, right? And that you're not justified by the law of Moses. But he can also go to somebody who never knew the Torah and come to them as someone who never knew the Torah and bring them as well. So it's just an approach. It's an approach to win the hearts and minds of the people.
Kind of similarly how Messiah called us to be fishers of men, and whenever you're fishing for different fish, you're going to use different bait, right? You might not use the same bait that you use for a bass as you would on a trout. You know what I'm saying? Because they like eating different things. You're going to use the bait that's going to catch the fish you're looking to catch, right?
Go ahead, speak my language, Professor Ed.
Oh yeah.
So it says for 3 Sabbath days he reasoned with them out of the scriptures. Now, we talking about the book of Acts, right? So they're still living. They just literally, the Messiah, all his ministry, his death, resurrection, crucifixion, all of that had just happened not too long before that.
What scripture is being referenced?
What scriptures are he referencing? When
the Gospels hadn't even been written at this point.
Exactly. He didn't pull out John, Matthew, Luke. he didn't pull out Romans because he hadn't wrote it yet.
He wasn't referencing Romans and Ephesians.
He wasn't pulling out Galatians. When he says the scriptures that they had were the Torah and the prophets.
What the hell? What? I'm not gonna be quiet and shit. It's
all right, I got it closed. All right, muted. So yes, the scriptures that he was talking about, that he's in the synagogue on Sabbath day, reasoning meaning having a heated discussion, one would call it a debate, with them on the Sabbath day in the synagogue. And the reasoning that he's using is from the Torah, from the law and the prophets.
Yep.
So that adds also to the thing. So chapter 20, verses 6 and 7. And we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, and came unto them to Troas in 5 days, where we abode 7 days. After the days of unleavened bread. This is a feast day that we are commanded to keep in the Torah again, in the law again. Verse 7, and upon the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul preached unto them, ready to depart on the morrow, and continued his speech until midnight. Okay, so
here we have clearly they wouldn't be referencing the Feast of Unleavened Bread if they were not keeping it, right? They
Do,
wouldn't be.
do you know what's quite interesting as well? Where it says they had the unleavened bread for 7 days. When you follow the lunar calendar, it meets up with the solar calendar perfectly, and it aligns with it, and it confirms that that's fact.
Yep.
Facts.
100%.
We are commanded to keep the Feast of Unleavened Bread for 7 days. The first day technically is Passover. Technically is Passover because you don't do leaven. But Feast of Unleavened Bread is for 7 days, with the last day also ending in a convocation, holy convocation, or a Sabbath, right?
And then on the first day of the week, what would they be doing? They'd be breaking bread.
Breaking bread, yeah. Because that first fruits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yep. Feast of First Fruits, which is also commanded in the law. Now, I think we are starting to transition. This is Acts 21. We're starting to transition to the accusations that people gave against Paul, saying that he was teaching against the law. Okay. All right. Let me scroll down. I think I got some stuff highlighted in here. Yep, here we go. And the day following, Paul went in with us unto James, and all the elders were present. So all of the elders were present. And when he had saluted them, he declared particularly what things the Most High had wrought among the Gentiles by his ministry. So all the elders are present. Paul's like, giving them honor, right? Because they're elders, so he's giving them their respect. But then he's expressing all of the good things that are being done by the Most High through him and his ministry. So all the people they're saving, all the people that they're bringing to the understanding of the gospel, all the people that they are healing, all of the people that they are casting demons out and providing for, right? And when they heard it, they glorified the Most High and said unto him, "Thou seest, brother, how many thousands of Jews there are which believe, and they are all zealous of the law." Are all zealous of the law. Zealous means exceedingly passionate about, exceedingly excited about, right? They're all extremely excited and passionate about the law, right? And this is directly after Paul is declaring how many good things happened with his ministry. Because if he's actually teaching against the law, then they shouldn't be zealous of the law after hearing or being a part of his ministry. It should be the opposite. But let me continue to read.
Wait, I'm sorry. What chapter and verse is that? I'm so sorry.
This is Acts chapter 21, verses 18. You can start at verse 18, and we're going through. We're on verse 21 right now. And they are informed of thee, that thou teachest all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, neither to walk after the customs. So here's where you start to see these allegations start to take root. What is it, therefore? The multitude must needs come together, for they will hear that thou art come. Do therefore this that we say to thee. We have 4 men which have a vow on them, right? It says, take them and purify thyself with them, and be at charges with them, that they may shave their heads, and all may know that those things whereof they are informed concerning thee are nothing, but that thou thyself also walkest orderly and keepest the law. So they're saying, some people are saying that you are teaching the Jews to forsake Moses and to not get their children circumcised. Basically, you're teaching people not to keep the law. So you need to show them that you're keeping the law, because we know you do, but you need to show them that you're keeping the law. So go ahead, and everything that you're reading where it says we have 4 men, so verses 23 and 24, that is the Nazirite vow. You can go to the book of Numbers, chapter 6. The only reason why I didn't have it pulled up here is because if we go into there, it's going to be much, much longer, right? So on your own time, go check out the book of Numbers, chapter 6, that has the Nazirite vow, where it's within the law, within the Torah, where the instruction of if you want to become a Nazirite, there is a specific process to becoming one, And there is a specific process to end the Nazarite vow that you take. And there's a purification process.
And so,
you got to do a lot of things.
Exactly. The purification after the Nazarite vow, shaving your head and all that kind of stuff. That's it's all right there. So he's in 100% compliance with the Torah here, and demonstrating it no less physically, not just simply speaking about it or using it as a reference or an analogy. He's physically going through the motions that are instructed in the Torah.
Oh, what Paul took the Nazarite vow, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
He was a Nazarite.
Yeah.
Because to go through this, they brought other people, other individuals who had already taken the Nazarite vow. They brought them, and Paul joined them and went through the purification process. He was already a Nazarite, meaning he was already living in accordance with a higher state of what is, I ain't gonna say required in the law. I'm gonna say it's allowable in the law. But if you are going to do the Nazarite vow, you have to follow the instructions specifically. The Nazarite vow is basically is you taking it a step up, right? You're saying you can live a righteous life, and that's cool. Nothing wrong with that. All praises. But if you want to take it a step up, then that's what a Nazarite is.
And they don't do alcohol, is that right? As well?
No strong drink, no grapes.
No strong drink, no grapes,
wine. Yeah. And you don't cut your hair.
Samson was a Nazarite from birth. So if you're kind of fuzzy about Nazarites and the Nazarite vow, Samson.
Interestingly enough, so was Samuel.
Do people still take the vow today? I mean, is it okay to do that if people choose to?
Yeah, if you choose to, of course. Yeah, you can take it.
Take it.
I would say it's fairly uncommon these days, but it was probably also not quite as uncommon back then, but it was probably uncommon back then as well.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, because you're literally signing up for a harder situation.
Mm-hmm.
You signed up for it. Go ahead, sis.
I was gonna say I'll add to that, but just as keeping the law, the problem lies in when you start believing that if you did the Nazarite law, that's going to be your salvation. Exactly. So with everything, that's where the problem would lie.
Because doing a Nazarite vow doesn't guarantee you any of that.
I got you. I got a good analogy just hit me from that comment. That was a great comment, sis. Thank you for saying that. So everybody in on this call at some point has played a video game, right? Whether you a gamer, whether you still playing video games right now, but at some point we've all played a video game. Now, when you turn on a video game, right, and you go to it, you got different difficulty levels that you can pick, right? And a lot of times when you go through the game, you got easy, medium, hard, and sometimes the games have, all kind of different categories and they call it different names. But basically, you got your easy, your medium, and your hard. If you play it on easy, you go through, it's for you to enjoy the experience, right? And then medium is typically like, it's kind of hard, so it's challenging you, but it's not so hard that it makes you not want to play the game. And then hard is what really challenges you, right? So the Nazarite vow is actually the hard level. But when you beat the game, whether it's on easy, medium, or hard, you still beat the game. Nothing really actually stood out. So for the people who would take the Nazarite vow, if they had it in the intent in their heart or in their mind that they are somehow better than someone else, or they earn their salvation or anything like that, it's the equivalent of, somebody playing a video game and they just beat it on hard and they just wanted to do it to brag. Arrogance is not gonna, arrogant people are not gonna inherit the kingdom of the Most High. That's not how it's set up. So that's a spiritual problem, right? A spiritual and a carnal combined problem within the individual. That's not we can't shame the Nazarite vow or the Torah because someone would choose to misuse it, if that makes sense.
I mean, could it be that the Heavenly Father had known that Paul was actually a genuine person, not looking for human approval and entertaining sin? He really wanted to get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why he selected him to be the apostle to the Gentiles.
Right.
Because if if you were an apostle to the Gentiles, but you were proud and filled with all of the negative things that we just mentioned, you couldn't do it. You couldn't effectively do your job. Because if you were supposed to go out to Gentiles, people who never had the law, never knew the Most High, never had a relationship, and all of a sudden they received the gospel and now they're believers, if you think you're better than them and you're looking down on them, your ministry isn't going to grow. But we see that Paul, it says right here, let's go up. Oh, that was the last one right here. And when they, hold on. And when he had saluted them, he declared particularly what things the Most High had wrought among the Gentiles by his ministry. And when they heard it, they gave the Most High praise and worship and said unto him, thou seest, brother, how many thousands of Jews that are which believe. When it says which believe, it's talking about believing on the Messiah, right? So Messianic Jews, and they are all zealous of the law. So if Paul was like looking down on anybody, or he had that we call it a God complex, right? If he had any of that, his ministry wouldn't have flourished. It wouldn't have produced.
Yeah, it would have failed if he was simply doing it for selfish reasons. It would have failed. It would have come to nothing.
Absolutely. So it says that Paul took them in, and the next day, purifying himself. To purify yourself is to follow the instructions within the Torah about the Nazirite vow, how to make it come to an end properly, right? And then entered into the temple to signify the accomplishment of the days of purification. The days of purification is also mentioned in Numbers chapter 6 for the Nazirite vow. Until that offering should be offered for every one of them. The offering is also mentioned. And when the 7 days were almost
mentioned there as well. That's another thing that's mentioned there as well, that offerings were still being made.
Yes, because offerings was governed by the Torah. And when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews which were of Asia, and they saw him in the temple, stirred up all the people and laid hands on him, crying out, men of Israel, help. This is the man that teacheth all men everywhere against the people and the law and this place, and further brought Greeks also into the temple and hath polluted his holy place. So after he did this purification process, right, they still were trying to cast accusations. It says, crying out, men of Israel, help. This is the man that teaches. So they're casting
which is no different than what they did to Messiah. And what did Messiah say? He says a student is no greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. And so right. Paul was taking it. He was like, okay, he wasn't even surprised by it,
Mm-hmm. Acts chapter 24, it continues. Don't y'all worry, it continues. And after 5 days, Ananias, the high priest, descended with the elders and with a certain orator named Tertullus, who informed the governor against Paul. So the word is against Paul. They're coming out, they're talking to the governor, they're trying to stir up words against him. It says, for we have found this man a pestilent fellow and a mover of sedition among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes, who also hath gone about to profane the temple, whom we took and would have judged according to our law. So let me understand. Let me make some clarifications here. When you see our law, this is a good example of what I'm talking about. When people read about the Pharisees and some of the wicked things that they were doing, the reason they were wicked was because they were selfish, they were arrogant, and they wanted to keep the power and control over the people. Now, they were supposed to be the individuals you were supposed to be able to go to learn the law. However, again, they were adding things to the law, and they were shifting and twisting things within the law to make it about them. So they would say, okay, if the law says don't eat pig, right? They would say, okay, yeah, don't eat pig, but you're also not supposed to eat, I don't know, broccoli. Let me just give that example. So pig and broccoli, according to them, was a no-no. But that's not what the Torah states. The Torah specifically just talks about not eating swine or pig.
A specific example would be when Messiah rebuked them for talking about not washing your hands before eating, right? Because it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah you have to wash your hands before you eat, right?
Exactly.
Now they had a specific set of regulations on how you had to wash your hands, otherwise you were ritually unclean. ritually according to the tradition of the elders. And what did Messiah say when they accused his disciples, saying, why are they eating without washing their hands according to the traditions of the elders? And Messiah says, why are you using the traditions of the elders to transgress the Torah? Because the Torah says don't add anything to it.
Facts.
You know what I'm saying? So that's an even more specific example. Now, is it a good idea to wash your hands? Sure, it's a good idea, right? And you should, wash your hands before you eat, right? But if it's not commanded in the Torah, then what's the?
Yeah, I'll even clarify even more so.
Oh, if you didn't wash your hands, then you're breaking the Torah.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying?
It's not against the Torah to not wash your hands. So that they were saying is the rules that they were putting in place, the washing of the hands, the eating broccoli analogy I gave, they were putting that on the same level of importance, right, as a commandment. Nah, we don't do that. The commandments tell you don't add to or take away from his word, right? That's what they were doing. So that's why in Matthew 23, right? Matthew chapter 23, the Messiah is going in on all of those Pharisees and Sadducees and elders and teachers of the law who were doing this. He was not addressing the entire group of the Pharisees.
And he wasn't saying, don't do the Torah. He was saying, why are you adding to it?
Correct. Exactly. So we see this, and this is verse 1. You says, Ananias the high priest. So we got the high priest, we got elders, and we got a certain orator. Orator just means he's profound at speech, right? He's able to speak things. So Tertullus, right? So we got them, and then they all went to the governor to cast accusations against Paul. Now it says they were saying all of this bad stuff about him. He's a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. All of this stuff, right? And then they said our law was the stuff that they were forcing on the people that wasn't legit. It was stuff that they were coming up with. It wasn't in the Torah.
The traditions, commandments, and doctrines of men.
Exactly. That's why Scripture says. Go ahead.
Which we will come to eventually in Colossians, where it talks about teachings, traditions, and commandments of men.
Mm-hmm. Colossians.
And that's not even to say that these traditions are necessarily bad in and of themselves. It's when you put it on the same level as the Torah and say that if you break this tradition, you're also breaking the Torah. That's when it becomes a problem.
I'll give y'all an example, right? This is just me. It's because you can follow your own set of rules, right? The Bible don't say that it doesn't say that you can't do that. You can follow your own rules as long as you keep the Torah as a fundamental baseline, right? Sister Marquita, I know you understand this coming from the military. Whenever you look at the regulations, right, within whatever AFI, whatever military regulation it is, it always states that you can make it more stringent, but you can't make it more lax. Because if you make it more lax, then you're breaking that regulation. The Bible is the same way. The Torah is the same way, right? So you can't change the Torah or change things or add things and make it a commandment. But you can do your own thing, right? So, for example,
if you personally want to be more accountable to yourself, and you say, "Hey, I'm going to do it this way," but then telling other people they have to do that as well, that's where
exactly.
It becomes a problem.
So here's my example, right? So here's one of my Bibles, right? Now, for me, this is just me personally. I don't like anything to be sat on top of my Bible unless it's another Bible. That's just me. I feel like this is the word of the Most High. And I should, give it some level of respect, right? So if my Bible is sitting on the table and somebody like just not thinking, they sit their phone down on top of it, I'll take it and I'll move it, right? And my family, everybody in my family knows not to put stuff on my Bible. That's just me. Now, will I tell somebody else that they should do the same thing that I'm doing and make it seem like what I'm doing is righteous and it is commanded by the Most High? No, I won't do that. It is a personal preference that I do. So I'm holding myself to a higher standard in that specific regard, but it's not for bragging purposes or anything. It's just what I feel like I should do. Now, if I said all of y'all should never put stuff on y'all Bibles because the Bible say if you put something on top of your Bible, you're breaking the Torah. That's when it becomes a problem. That's when it becomes an issue. And that's what the elders, some of the elders and some of the Pharisees and Sadducees and teachers of the law were doing. That's why they got chastised. That's why they wanted to ultimately kill the Messiah and kill Paul, because they were showing them that that's not what y'all supposed to be doing. So reading verse 10, it says, then Paul, after that, the governor had beckoned unto him to speak. Answer. So the governor was like, all right, Paul, go ahead and speak. You got these accusations against you, go ahead and speak. For as much as I know that thou hast been of many years a judge unto this nation, I do the more cheerfully answer for myself. So Paul is like, okay, I'm going to speak for myself. Right? After that, Paul goes on to say, because that thou mayest understand that there are yet but 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem to worship. He's talking about going to Jerusalem for a feast day to worship. And they neither found me in the temple disputing with any man, neither raising up the people, neither in the synagogues nor in the city, neither can they prove the things whereof they now accuse me. So if they're accusing him of teaching against the law, he's saying they can't prove any of it. He says, but this I confess unto thee, that after the way which they call heresy, so worship I the Most High of my fathers, believing what? All things which are written in the law and in the prophets. So this right here, this one verse right here, verse 14, it could literally shut down any argument that would say Paul taught against the Torah. Well, I know there's so much more evidence that proves this, but Paul said, okay, y'all are casting accusations against me. Y'all done brought the governor. The governor told me to speak. I said, I'm going to speak for myself. Let me stand up here and testify, right? And he's saying all of the accusations against me, they can't prove it because it's not true. And I'm going to speak for myself. And I said, I believe I serve the Most High of my fathers, because Paul was a Jew from the tribe of Benjamin. So the Elohim of his fathers was the true Elohim. Then he says, I believe all things which are written in the law and in the prophets. The law and in the prophets. That's also the scriptures that he was going in the synagogue and reasoning with the elders in the synagogue with. So if he's keeping Sabbaths, if he's teaching the law if he's teaching from the law, right? He's observing things that are commanded and governed in the law, like the Nazirite vow, right? Not specifically commanding us to do it, but if you're going to do it, you're commanded to keep it a certain way, right? And then he's speaking for himself, saying that he believes all of the things which are in the law and the prophets. Why all of a sudden are we taking the rest of his words, the rest of his epistles, and saying that he's now teaching against all of that stuff? No, that's not what it was, because at this point, this is not Saul of Tarsus who was persecuting the believers. This is the renewed Paul, right? This is after all of that. So it just is difficult. And I understand why, because I had that, like I said, I can understand wholeheartedly the Christian perspective. But when you actually read the text, if Paul says he's speaking for himself, and then he tells you that he believes in all of the law and all of the prophets, and he ain't teaching against it, and all of these different things, when are we going to just believe Paul and just let him, what he said for himself? You know, when the Messiah starts to speak and you read in that red bold print, why not we going to just believe what they say in the scriptures instead of trying to add our own understandings to it? This is chapter 25. It says, now when Festus was come into the province, after 3 days, he ascended from Caesarea to Jerusalem. Then the high priest and the chief of the Jews informed him against Paul and besought him and desired favor against him, that he would send for him to Jerusalem, laying wait in the way to kill him. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself would depart shortly thither. Let them therefore, say he, which among you are able, go down with me and accuse this man, and if there be any wickedness in him. And when he had tarried among them more than 10 days, He went down to Caesarea, and the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, commanded Paul to be brought. So you're hearing them. They want to kill him. They want to lock this brother up. They still trying to go hard at Paul, right? Verse 7. And when he was come, the Jews which came down from Jerusalem stood round about and laid many and grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove. So if I'm screaming at the top of my lungs at one of you, right, and I'm casting out all of these accusations, and I can't prove any of them, I don't have any evidence, I don't have any supporting documentation, I don't have any proof, that means that I'm casting out my personal opinion on you if I don't have any proof, right? But then it goes on, it says, while he answered for himself, again, we see Paul answering for himself, not answering from a certain doctrine or a certain understanding or a certain misinterpretation of one of his epistles. He's answering for himself. Neither against the law of the Jews, neither against the temple, nor yet against Caesar have I offended anything at all. Now, if he was teaching to go against the law or to break the law or to forsake Moses, then that would have been an offense. He said, I offended. I did not. Have I offended anything at all? I have not done any of that, right? But Festus, willing to do the Jews a pleasure, answered Paul and said, wilt thou go up to Jerusalem and there be judged of these things before me? Let me tell you why he said that. Because Jerusalem was overly populated and saturated with that certain sect of the Pharisees that we've been talking about, the wicked people. So he wanted him to go back to Jerusalem to stand trial because he knew that if he went there, it was going to be a huge bias against Paul. Because it's not about who's right. It's about what you can prove and like who the most. If it's 100 people in the room and 89 of them are saying that you're guilty, it don't matter what you're saying or what the small portion of the remaining 11 are saying. So they were trying to get the venue to a more biased location. Then said Paul, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. To the Jews have I done no wrong, as thou very well knowest. He like, you know I ain't teaching against the Torah. You know I ain't teaching against the prophets. So guess what? I stand judgment by Caesar, because at this time, you know, Israel and Jerusalem and all of these various areas was under the rule of Rome, okay? For if I be an offender or have committed anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. I refuse not to die. Not, I refuse to die. I refuse not to die. He's saying if he has done anything wrong, if he's broken the law, broken the covenants, forsaken Moses, forsaken the prophets, lied, did anything wrong, he will not refuse to be killed. He wants to die. He wants to be killed if he's done anything wrong. Okay.
Yeah, he's basically saying if I've done something that the Torah says I should be killed for, then do it.
Let me reiterate.
I'm glad to,
Paul,
because if I've done one of those things, I should be put to death.
Exactly. And let me reiterate. Paul knew the Torah probably better than majority of them, if not all of them, because before, when he was a Pharisee, he studied under Galileo, who was one of the top Pharisees. So he had that top flight high education in the Torah anyways. So for him to say that, he's putting a lot on the line already, but with his background, right? Because a man is also his reputation during in the Hebrew culture, your reputation means everything too as well. It says, but if there be none of these things, wherefore these accuse me, no man may deliver me unto them. I appeal unto Caesar. So he's like, take me to the emperor. I'm gonna appeal to the emperor. We're gonna hash this out with Caesar. We're not gonna go to Jerusalem so y'all can try to lynch me, because we know we're not gonna get a fair trial there. And when they had been there many days, Festus declared Paul's cause unto the king, saying, there is a certain man left in bonds by Felix, about whom, when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews informed me, desiring to have judgment against him. So he went to the king and he's like, yo, we got this guy. He's got all these accusations against him. Go ahead and check him out. Therefore, when they were come hither without any delay on the morrow, I sat on the judgment seat and commanded the man to be brought forth. So we got it again. Against whom, when the accuser stood up, they brought none accusation of such things as I supposed, but had certain questions against him, what? Of their own superstition. What did I just say earlier? If I'm hurling insults with you and I can't prove none, it's coming from my own opinion. It was their own superstition that they was pulling out. So they didn't cast any accusations at that point. They were just asking him questions based on their own interpretation of scripture and what they wanted. And one of the, and he says, and of one, the Messiah, which was dead, whom Paul affirmed to be alive. So that's, yo, man, like, come on, bro. Like, y'all can't be out here trying to falsely accuse folks, but they would do it. They would do it too. I'll tell you, they wicked. They was wicked. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, this is chapter 26. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, thou art permitted to speak for thyself. Then Paul stretched forth the hand and answered for himself. Again, people are skipping all of these acts when Paul is speaking for himself, and they just go into these letters. They go into these letters that he write in. And we're gonna address that too, Romans chapter 7. I think myself happy, King Agrippa, because I shall answer for myself this day before thee touching all the things whereof I am accused of the Jews, especially because I know thee to be an expert in all customs and questions which are among the Jews. Wherefore I beseech thee to hear me patiently. My manner of life from my youth, which was at the first among my own nation at Jerusalem, know all the Jews. So he's saying, since I was a kid, I was brought up. As a kid, I was brought up, and he was a Pharisee. He's given that background, which knew me from the beginning. If they would testify that after the most straightest sect of our religion, I lived a Pharisee, right? The straightest sect, the most purest sect of the religion, of our religion, I lived a Pharisee. He's telling them his background, giving him his resume, so to speak. And now I stand and am judged for the hope of the promise made of the Most High unto our fathers, unto which purpose our 12 tribes, instantly serving the Most High day and night, hope to come. For which hope's sake, King Agrippa, I am accused of the Jews. So he's telling them he's accused of all of these things, but you can Google him. You can Google Paul, right? And when he had thus spoken, the king rose up, and the governor, and Bernice, and they that sat with them. And when they were gone aside, they talked between themselves, saying, so after Paul finished his whole dissertation and said everything that he was accused of and who he is and what he's about, what he's truly about, at the end of that, they all stood up and they went off to the side and they had a conversation amongst themselves. And it says, this man doeth nothing worthy of death or of bonds. Then said Agrippa unto Festus, this man might have been set at liberty if he had not appealed unto Caesar. Because, let me tell you, first thing, let's address verse 31, right? One, they said that he is not guilty. Now, they understood, King Agrippa, you heard Paul say that King Agrippa knows the customs of the Jews. So, to know the custom of the Jews is to also know the punishment for breaking the Torah, according to the Jews. So, if he says that Paul has done nothing wrong, and he's done nothing worthy of death, then that means that Paul never blasphemed, he never taught against the Torah or anything like that. So that's the first thing to understand. The second thing to understand is they just said that he would have been set free already if he didn't appeal to Caesar. But because he appealed to Caesar, he had to stand trial in Rome to Caesar. But if he hadn't appealed to them, they would have been the authority to make the judgment, and then they would have just let him go because he was innocent. So if he's innocent of all the accusations that was brought up against him, then that means, guess what? He didn't do it. He didn't do any of it. Acts 28, and then we're gonna get right into Galatians. I know it's a little longer, but I kind of let y'all know earlier. So I do apologize, and I'm trying to speed through this as fast as I can. And it came to pass, it's verse 17. Acts 28 and 17. And it came to pass that after 3 days, Paul called the chief of the Jews together. And when they were come together, he said unto them, men and brethren, though I have committed nothing against the people or customs of our fathers, Yet was I delivered prisoner from Jerusalem into the hands of the Romans. Now, let's look at this. Let's look at this. He committed nothing against the people, right? Or customs of our fathers. There were customs. The Torah could be considered in certain areas a custom, right? However, there was the true customs, and then there were the customs and traditions of men that were created and added. Okay, that's why there's differentiation there. He said I committed nothing against the people or the customs of our fathers. So our way of life, our Hebraic way of life, keeping the Torah, serving the Most High, loving one another, and all of that. I didn't do anything wrong with those things. Yet he was put as a prisoner. It says, who, when they had examined me, would have let me go. He's talking about King Agrippa and the people who were just there, right, that we just read. Because there was no cause of death in me, because I was innocent, right? But when the Jews spake against it, I was constrained to appeal unto Caesar, not that I had aught to accuse my nation of. For this cause, therefore, have I called for you to see you and to speak with you, because that for the hope of Israel I am bound with this chain. And they said unto him, we neither receive letters out of Judea concerning thee, neither any of the brethren that came showed or spake any harm of thee. But we desire to hear of thee what thou thinkest, for as concerning this sect, we know that everywhere it is spoken against. And when they had appointed him a day, there came many to him into his lodging, to whom he expounded. Now check this out. Check this out now. Whom he expounded and testified the kingdom of the Most High. Now check this out. Persuading them concerning the Messiah, both out of the law of Moses and out of the prophets. From what? Morning till evening. Let me let y'all know. We're going to be on here for a couple hours more. This is a lot that I'm saying out here. This is a lot that Professor S is saying. But we're not speaking about the Torah from morning until evening. You know how long that is? If you just talk about daylight, that's about 12 hours, right? He is speaking of the Most High and of the Messiah from the Torah. Why would he do this if he didn't follow it? Why would he do this if he didn't believe it? Why would he do this if his ministry was teaching people against that? That don't make any sense. None whatsoever. And this is Paul. This is why I love Acts, because yes, you can read certain things in his epistles. You can read certain things in Romans a certain way, in Ephesians and Galatians and all of that.
But you get his own testimony right here.
But in his own testimony.
Straight from the horse's mouth. Straight from the horse's mouth.
Before all of that.
Yeah.
This is why, and what number I had it at? Number 3 of the 5 things I told you in the beginning. You have to understand Paul's viewpoint when you're reading his letters. This explains his viewpoint. We done went through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, roughly 11 different chapters explaining how Paul either kept the law or was put on trial for supposedly teaching against the law and being proven innocent, both from his own mouth and from the people who was accusing him. They tried to accuse him, and then when they came to the courtroom, some of them couldn't even accuse him of anything. Then they just started questioning him from their own opinion. Then you had the people that would cast judgment on him, right? That would be the authority figures to give him the death sentence. They were like, we ain't found nothing wrong with him. So you got all of this overwhelming evidence in the book of Acts, but yet none of this stuff is mentioned when it comes to the argument of did Paul teach against the law? This is Paul's viewpoint. This is what I mean when you have to keep this in mind when you're reading it. Because if you don't have this understanding when you're reading his epistles, you're not going to understand what his words are actually saying. So with that, I want to quickly jump to Romans chapter 7. Now here it goes. Verse 1, it says, this is Paul. This is one of his epistles. Now that you've seen all of that stuff in Acts, now look at what he's saying here. Know ye not, brethren, For I speak to them that know the law, that how that the law hath dominion over a man as long as he liveth. He says, I speak to them that know the law. So here's the thing. If you do not know the law, if you don't have a firm foundation of the law, he's not talking to you. He's not talking to you. So you have to have it. You have to have that understanding. You can't understand calculus if you haven't had standard 1 algebra, right? You can't go to the upper echelon if you don't have the basics. Get the basics. Learn the basics. Then you can understand what Paul is talking about. Now, with that, before we jump into Galatians 5, is there any questions, concerns, or anything about all of the stuff that we just covered? Because I know I said a lot. Okay, cool. So I know you said you got some notes, brother. When your notes come up, just pause me. Because I got some notes here as well, and I got some notes and some mental notes that I'm gonna bring out as well when we start this. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, bet. All right, Galatians 5, y'all. All right. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage, right? Behold, I, Paul, say unto you, so this is Paul speaking, but we know it's because of this is one of his letters, but I'm just going with it, right? That if ye be circumcised, Christ shall not profit you nothing. Stop right there. So if you get circumcised, because we ain't supposed to be keeping the law no more. If you get circumcised, Christ said you ain't gonna profit anything because we ain't supposed to have to keep that law no more. No, that's not what he's saying, family. That's not what he's saying. You got to understand his viewpoint. Let's continue reading and you'll see what he's saying. For I testify again to every man that is circumcised that he is a debtor to the whole law. See? If you get circumcised, you're a debtor to the whole law. We've been delivered from all of that. We don't got to keep the law no more. No, Paul is continuing on. He says, Christ is become of none effect unto you. Now, who is he talking to? He says, whosoever of you are justified by the law. So if you feel like keeping the law is going to justify you and grant you your salvation, this is who he was talking to. He's talking to you. He's not talking to everybody who keeps the law. We don't keep the law to be saved.
No, because the circumcision,
because we're saved.
Exactly. The faith comes first, and then the circumcision comes after. If you try to get circumcised first and then have faith, you're putting the cart before the horse, and it doesn't work.
But doesn't Romans talk about that as well, about the circumcision of the heart?
Mm-hmm.
Romans chapter 6. I got it here too. We're gonna definitely hit that up too.
Yep. One note I did have on verse 1, where it talks about the entangled again with the yoke of bondage. What is a yoke of bondage as opposed to a yoke of freedom, right? The yoke of bondage in John chapter 8. In John chapter 8, verse 34, Yahusha answered them saying, truly, truly, I say to you, everyone doing sin is a bondservant of sin. And we know in 1 John, it says, sin is the transgression of the Torah. So so the yoke of bondage would clearly be someone transgressing the Torah, and then they would be a bondservant of transgressing the Torah. As opposed to in Matthew 11:29, I'll go there real fast.
Hold on. Go ahead and share your screen.
Oh, share my screen?
Yeah. I just, because it's one thing to hear somebody say something, and then it's another thing to actually see the scripture that they're referencing. So go back to John, where you just quoted it, and just show it on the screen.
So, John 8:34, and this is in the scriptures version. Yahusha answered and said, truly, truly, I say to you, everyone doing sin is a servant of sin, right? And then we go to Matthew
Hold on,
11:29.
before you go to Matthew 11:29, go to 1 John 3 and 4.
1 John
And
3, 4.
yeah, just show them where it says the biblical definition of what sin is.
Whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law.
So remember when I said substitute sin, you substitute the word sin for transgressing the law or transgression of the law, and that'll help give you the full context of whatever is being said.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
No.
Appreciate it.
Now, if we go to Matthew, because we were talking about the yoke of bondage, right? As opposed to the yoke of freedom, right? Matthew 11, verse 29, Messiah says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your soul." So, his yoke is easy, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light, right? Mm-hmm. And we know that Messiah was teaching the Torah completely in its proper context, right?
Absolutely.
And that is a light yoke, an easy yoke, right? That is an easy yoke. Whereas, as we saw in Galatians 5, verse 1, we don't want to be entangled in the yoke of bondage, right? And become a bond servant of sin.
Facts.
We want to be under this easy and light burden, this easy yoke of Messiah. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a hit another thing too, because I had a note on verse 1 as well, and it's going to be prevalent throughout this whole thing too, but I'll show you guys quickly here. So we click on this note, Galatians 5, Romans 7 and 6, and Romans 7 and 23. Now, I'm going to show y'all what it is because I have it here. Romans chapter 7, going back to it, Romans chapter 7 and 6. Remember Galatians 5, it says, "Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty." Liberty means freedom, right? Wherewith the Messiah has made us free, okay? So stand in liberty because the Messiah made us free. And be not entangled again. Entangled means to be wrapped up and confused and held down, right? With the yoke of bondage. In Deuteronomy 28, it talks about, if you don't keep the laws and all of these curses are going to come upon you and blah, 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 blah. And everybody used that in the Israelite community. Got it. But it talks about yokes of iron being around their necks. And if you see those old slave pictures from transatlantic slave trade, you see these collars, these metal collars with bars coming out, right? Those are called yokes of iron. It's something to help you hold you down and keep you bound, right? So yoke of bondage, everything that he just, Professor S just said was from the Messiah's own words, right? Now let's look at Romans. Romans 7 and 6. Now, for those who have the previous understanding of what Paul meant, they're going to read this and say, this is saying that we're delivered from the law of Moses, but I'm going to show you. It says, "But now we are delivered from the law, that being dead, wherein we were held down, entangled, right?
In a yoke,
that we should serve in newness of spirit," right? Spirit, we say by faith through grace, right? Not the Torah, right? "And not in the oldness of the letter." Now, this entire chapter, I got multiple videos about this. But scroll down. It says, "I find then a law." Remember, when you see the word law from Paul, you have to pause and try to figure out what law he's talking about. Because if you read the word law in Romans 7 and 6, you would have said that's the Torah, right? Now look, it says, "I find in a law that when I would do good, evil is present with me." Evil is associated with what? Sin. And we know sin is what? A transgression of the law, right? Okay, continue on. "For I delight in the law of Elohim after the inward man." So if he says, "I find a law that when I would do good, evil is present with me," then he says, I delight in the law of the Most High.
Then you can't be talking about the same law.
You can't talk about the same law, right? But this isn't Professor S and Solemn Prophet giving y'all our own opinion. I told you everything on this show is coming from the scriptures, so keep reading. But I see another law. Boom. There you go. That's why I said you can't always take when he says law as the law of Moses every single time. No, because that's not it. He says, but I see another law in my members, in his body, in his flesh, right? What is it doing? Warring against the law of my mind. The mind is the delight in the law of Elohim after the inward man, the mind, and bringing me into what? Captivity to the law of sin. The law of sin, this entire thing right here, the law of sin, which is in my members. So he's saying when he's faced with temptation, right? It's like the old analogy. You got the angel on one side and the devil on the other side, and they're both telling you what you're supposed to do, and you got to make the decision of where you want to go. That's what he's saying, right? The law of the Most High that is a part of the inward man that's in his mind is the Torah. The law in his members is the law of sin, right? So he says, this is the law of sin. Then he goes, O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from this body of death? He says, I thank the Most High through Messiah, right? So then with the mind, I myself serve the law of the Most High, which is the Torah, but with his flesh, with the flesh, the law of sin, right? Now
that reminds me of the flesh and the spirit. The spirit's willing and the flesh is weak.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yep. Now, if you go back to verse 6, now read it with new understanding. For now we are delivered from the law of sin, not the Torah. What is there to be delivered from? That being dead we were held, that we should serve in the newness of spirit and not the oldness of the letter.
And clearly it's talking about the law of sin, because we know Paul also said the wages of sin is death, and it's talking about being dead therein. So if you were,
that's Romans 6:23. Now look, if he was talking about the law, if this was the law of Moses here, why would a few verses down, why would he say, wherefore the law is holy, and the commandment holy, and just and good? Then he says, was then that which is good made death unto me? The Most High forbid. But sin, i.e. the transgression of the law of sin, that it might appear as a transgression of the law, or sin, worketh death in me, Romans 6:23, for the wages of sin is death. That which is good, that sin, again, the same definition, the transgression of the law, by the commandment might become exceedingly sinful. Then he says, for we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, sold under sin. Sold under sin is to be sold as a bond person.
As a bond, once again, yes,
given to sin.
In the bondage. Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So if the law is spiritual, because I know a lot of people believe that old law of Moses is those laws and those rules, that old dusty book you're supposed to follow. And if you ain't following it, that old dusty book, right? You pull it out. Oh, you got to blow the dust off. You know what I'm saying? Oh, it's not like that. The law is spiritual, family. The law is spiritual. So going all the way back to that Old Testament that people don't read no more, right? All of that has spiritual connotations and undertones. Now, if people don't keep it spiritually, that's their problem. But the way we're supposed to always originally keep it was in a spiritual manner. So going back to Galatians 5.
Because the spiritual is going to be reflected in the physical, but doing something physically is not necessarily reflected in the spiritual.
Facts. Hold on, let me go. Romans 6:23, because we mentioned it a few times. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of the Most High is eternal life through the Messiah. The wages of sin is death. That's why you keep hearing him say, I was dead, I was dead, I was dead. You're dead, you're dead, you're dead. All right, back to Galatians. For we through the Spirit wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. So Did I read verse 4? Yeah, it becoming unaffected you. Oh, I didn't finish it. I stopped it right here. Whosoever of you are justified by the law. So those of you guys who think that the law is going to justify you and keeping it is going to give you salvation, ye are fallen from grace. You have fallen from grace. It says, for we, through the Spirit, wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. Again, but let me pause, y'all, right? If the law is spiritual, according to Paul, if he's referencing spiritual matters, the Spirit specifically, right?
Then it's got to be in reference to the law, too.
It has to be in reference to the law.
I mean, wasn't that the purpose of Yeshua coming? Is because no man could fulfill the law. That's the purpose of Yeshua, not just the purpose for redemption.
Yes, because he was capable of performing the law perfectly, whereas we are not.
Right.
Exactly. So when you hear spirit or faith or grace, it's not contrary to the law. It's not contrary to works. Last week we read James chapter 2, verses 14 through 26, where it said faith without works is dead, being alone. It says, show me your faith, and I will show you my faith by my works. Right?
Okay, yeah, walk by faith and not by sight. But faith without works is dead. Yeah.
Correct. So faith, right? Faith, grace, all of that, spirit, works, the works of the law, the physical acts, all of those things, right? They have to work together. So,
which was the note I had there with James 2 on verse 6.
Go ahead.
No, that was just a note I made. See, where on verse 6 it says, neither circumcision availeth anything, nor uncircumcision. So uncircumcision doesn't do any more than circumcision if it's not through faith and love. Faith which worketh by love, and then it goes back to the works that James is talking about. Faith without works is dead. Once again, It goes right back to, if you have the faith, then you're going to work out your faith by love. And then, the circumcision is going to be... because
keep going. We're gonna have to go to James. I'm gonna pull up James while you talk.
All right, yeah. So because the physical act of circumcision is not going to gain you anything in and of itself, and being uncircumcised physically is also not going to gain you anything or lose you anything in and of itself. It is the faith and the love that you have which causes the works to take place. And eventually, if you have that faith and you believe, you're going to read and you're going to say, I want to participate in Passover. And then you're going to come to Exodus 12 and you're going to say, well, I guess I better get circumcised. You know what I'm saying? But you don't want to put the cart before the horse. If you're going to get circumcised first and you don't have the faith, then what good is it? It does nothing. It's just a physical act that does nothing.
And faith comes by hearing the word, isn't it? Was it Abraham that lived by faith and that was passed on?
Yes, by faith. Yes, because Abraham had faith and it was counted to him for righteousness.
Yep, which is what this is actually going to say verbatim.
Exactly what it's going to say verbatim.
It says, what doth it profit, my brethren, though a man say he hath faith, right, and have not works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister be naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you say unto them, depart in peace, be ye warmed and filled, notwithstanding ye give them not those things which are needful to the body, what doth it profit? Even so faith, if it hath not works, is dead, being alone. Yea, a man may say, thou hast faith, and I have works. Show me thy faith without thy works, and I will show thee my faith by my works. Thou believest that there is one Elohim, thou doest well. The devils also believe and tremble. But wilt thou know, O vain man, that faith without works is dead? And like you just mentioned, Abraham, was not Abraham our father justified? See that word justified? You can't be justified by the law. It's because faith has to be a part of it.
Because faith has to be a part of it. If you don't
keep the law because you have faith. You don't keep the law.
Hallelujah.
You have faith. Salvation is from the faith, but the law is
you don't get faith by keeping the law. You keep the law because you have faith. It's the opposite, the other way around, which is Yeah.
Yeah.
It's-
I don't know. I don't know how
And-
many of you
and-
guys are. I don't know how many of you
and-
guys are
and-
married, but I'm married, right? I don't treat my wife good because she's my wife. I treat my wife good because I love her. Out of the love that I have for my wife, I treat my wife good. And let's look out in the world, right? For people who get treated good, but it's not coming from a place of good, right? You see what happens, right? Those relationships fall apart. So you don't keep the law because it's gonna grant you salvation. You keep the law from faith because faith is the origin and the loving one another, loving your neighbor as yourself, loving the Most High, keeping the Torah, doing good, being righteous. All of those things flow from the faith. The faith, it has to work together. That's why he said, if you show me your faith, if you have faith and you have works, he says, I will show you my faith by my works.
Because your works are going to demonstrate your faith. Because
Exactly.
faith is not a noun; it's an action.
It's
a verb.
Go
It's
ahead,
a verb.
Brother Alan.
Is the actions speak louder than words?
Mm-hmm.
Facts. Actions do speak louder than words.
Because you can say all you want, you can say anything you want, but until you have an action to go along with it, it's just words.
And the word of Yah helps us fulfill the true action.
Yep. So was not Abraham our father justified by works when he had offered Isaac upon the altar, his son upon the altar? Seest thou how faith wrought with his works, and by works was faith made perfect, and the scripture was fulfilled, which saith, Abraham believed the Most High, and it was imputed unto him for righteousness, and he was called a friend of the Most High. You see then how that by works a man is justified, and not by faith only. So you're seeing the opposite spectrum, because Paul is dealing with people who don't have a background in the works. They have a background in the faith because they're newly converted. Yesterday, they knew nothing of the Most High. They knew nothing of the Messiah. They knew nothing of the Torah. Today, through a revelation, through the gospel being preached to them, now they believe in the Most High. They believe in the Messiah. They still don't have a background in the Torah. So why are you going to force all of the Torah on them? Let them learn it. They'll get it. Be patient. They'll get it, right? So he's dealing with the opposite side of the spectrum. So see that how by works a man is justified and not by faith. Only for Paul, it's starting with the faith. Then you'll get to the works. But Abraham already had faith and he believed. So his works was a
it was a product. It was produced by his.
Exactly. So then it says, likewise also was not Rahab the harlot, that's Joshua chapter 5 for you guys who want to check that out, justified by works when she had received the messengers and had sent them out another way. For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. And I had to hit James 2 up because we were gonna keep making references to James, or making references similar to what James already said, and then it was going to go over some heads. So I just want to make sure we hit that. Now going back to Galatians 5.
Before you go back, can I ask something here?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'd like to point out, how do you have faith alone? What does that really look like?
Faith alone.
What is faith without works?
Exactly, it's dead. It's nothing.
No. I'll give you a good example. All right. All of the newly converted Gentiles. That's faith alone. Because they don't have nothing else. So if you, like, let's just say you was an atheist and you're walking down the street and you're like, man, I don't believe in God. God is stupid. Then you get a divine intervention or lightning strikes and your body's saved, and you now know, whatever the revelation was, you now know for 100% fact that God is real, right? Now you have the faith in God because of whatever happened. You now have that faith, but you don't have any background in works. You have no background in the Torah. You have no background on what you're supposed to do. You just know that God exists.
All you know is, I believe now. I better go buy a Bible. right?
Like that video that was out here is circulating around. People have been sending it to me. The guy in the car driving, and he's like, if God is real, then the lightning will strike in 3, 2, 1, and then lightning strikes like boom. And he goes, oh, well, this is concerning. And then the dude is laughing, he crying, laughing, falling out of the car. But that atheist in that car who's like, okay, if God is real, lightning will strike in 3 seconds. And then he counts down and then lightning strikes. And he's like, oh shoot, my whole life is a lie. You know what I'm saying? So if you're in that position, right, you now know that the existence of God is real, right? You are in that position of where you are only living by faith. This is why they've had to start to observe the Torah through the first four things, because that was going to get them in the temple. They needed to get them in the temple so that they could get the rest of the Torah, but they had to get them in the temple. So that was the first 4 things. And over time, all the rest of that stuff wrought by their faith, as a product of their faith, they're going to want to go to the synagogue on the Sabbath day. They're going to want to hear the law of Moses preached. They're going to want to learn more about the Torah and study the Torah. That stuff is going to come.
How did they get faith? How did they get faith? Was it reading? Because they had the word, but is that how they got faith then?
Some of them heard the apostles preach, like Paul, right? Some of them were like Peter and Cornelius, right? Cornelius was a Gentile man. Now, he did serve the Most High, but there were other Gentiles that was there. And then after Peter preached the gospel to everybody that was present, the Holy Spirit came down on everybody, not just the Jews, but the Gentiles as well. So in those instances, right, they heard the gospel preached, they received the Holy Spirit. That's faith. But now that they have that faith, now what do you do? What do you work with? One of the arguments I heard about the law versus grace, or the law versus faith, right, was, the scripture says that all the law hangs on loving the Most High and loving each other. Now, and my response to that is, if I asked each and every one of you, right, to take a child, right, and I'm a parent, I know Marquita's a parent, Joel's a parent, right, Alan's a parent, some of the people over there, y'all are probably parents too. If you take a child and you only teach them, give them this one instruction to love God and to love each other, and you send them out into the world, how are they going to function? How are they going to know what to do? How are they going to know right from wrong? How are they going to do this? All they know is love God and love each other. Loving God and loving each other is at the core essence of every law. True, yes. But we as human beings, we need structure and we need specific guidance to help us navigate through the various issues of life. If you told a baby, love God, love each other, love God, love each other, and you send them out, go do your thing now, go be fruitful and multiply. Just
they ain't gonna know. They ain't gonna know how to love each other. They don't know how to love each other and how to love God. All they exactly. It's just words to them.
It's just words. So why did the Messiah say all of the whole Torah falls on those two? Because once you learn the Torah and you understand the Torah, you go back to that and you realize,
and then you know how to.
Loving the Most High, I'm being obedient to him. I'm demonstrating my love for him by keeping his commandments. Oh, loving each other, I'm keeping his commandments that tell me to love my neighbor, because the law isn't telling you not to love your neighbor. You see what I'm saying? You have specific instructions, because if I said go love the Most High, love each other, go ahead, do your thing, you're gonna be lost. But if I says love the Most High, love each other, here's how you do it. If you come into contact with this individual, this is how you navigate. If you come in contact with this specific situation, this is how you handle it. If you get married, these are the things you're supposed to do if you get married. If you own a business, this is how you're supposed to conduct yourself in business. If you have a farm, this is how you're supposed to conduct yourself with the farm. If you are royalty, this is how you're supposed to conduct yourself as royalty. That's the Torah. That's the law. But it's not just this physical rule book, because again, Paul said that the law is spiritual. All of these are spiritual, multifaceted understandings. Now, you might look at it as just the rule book, but it's much more than that. So it says, for in Messiah neither circumcision availeth anything, nor uncircumcision, but faith which worketh by love. Right? You can go to, you can go to was it First Corinthians 13, where it talks about love. You know, love is patient, love is kind, it does not boast, all of that, right? Ye did run well. Who did hinder you that ye should not obey the truth? This persuasion cometh not of him that called you. So hold on. You did run well, right? He said you ran well. So if you ran well, that means that whatever was instilled in you initially gave you the motivation and the instruction for you to run well, to do your thing correctly, right? He says, but did hinder you that ye should not obey the truth? So he's asking, what has hindered you? What has happened since I first came to you and gave you the gospel, and you were faithfully obedient and following and just on fire for the Most High? What happened? He says, this persuasion cometh not of him that called you. So of him that called you, this could mean Paul himself or whoever the apostle was that give them that initial instruction, or from the Most High itself through the Holy Spirit. Regardless, the persuasion that they now have didn't come from them. He says, a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. Leaven is how you make bread, right? It's a part of the bread making process. But leaven is also symbolic of what? Sin, which goes back to the transgression of the law. So a little sin, a little transgression of the law spoils the whole bunch, right?
That's why they had the unleavened bread, feast of unleavened bread, to represent sin.
Yeah, it represented the purging of yourself, your body, your household of all sin for 7 days.
Back to verse 7. We can go to Psalm 119, 142, because it says that you should not obey, that ye should not obey the truth, right? And we need to get a context of what the truth is. We need to get a context of what the truth is and show what truth actually is, right? Because if we're going to obey the truth, we have to know what the truth is in order to obey it. And so right here in Psalm 119, 142, it says, thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy Torah is truth. The Torah is truth. We'll look at that in the scriptures version here. Righteousness is righteousness forever, and your Torah is truth, right? So the Most High's Torah is the truth. So when Paul says that you should not obey the truth, what's he talking about? He's saying that you're not obeying the Torah, right? And now to go to verse 9, where it's talking about a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. Let's see, 1 Corinthians 15. 1 Corinthians 15:33. What do we have here? It says, do not be led astray. Evil company corrupts good habits. So when he's saying a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump, what he's saying is if you get a couple people in here with false doctrines, false teachings, etc., it's going to corrupt everything. And we can look at that at King James as well. King James says, be not deceived. Evil communications corrupt good manners. Essentially the same thing, saying that if there's wickedness amongst you, it's going to permeate the whole thing. Just like if you sprinkle just a little bit, and you don't even have to put it, you get a whole lump of dough, right? And you sprinkle a little leaven in one side, and then you set it down, it's going to spread throughout the whole thing and raise it up. So,
absolutely. This is why in the Old Testament, for the preservation of Israel, the Most High told the Israelites to go into the land and kill everybody, because a little bit of sin, a little leaven, a little pagan worship, a little bit of, all of this stuff that they were doing could catch on to the other Israelites and bring the whole nation of Israel, the Most High specifically chosen people, and corrupt them. And if they're corrupted, then there's all hope is lost, because everything revolves around Israel. Now, Israel today consists of natural Israel and the grafted in branches of Israel. But Israel is still a focus nonetheless. So
Yeah, because in the New Jerusalem you have to enter in through one of the gates, and the gates are named after what? The 12 tribes. So
tribes.
it's still all centered around Israel. It's never been changed. You know, the whole replacement theology of saying, oh, now it's the church and it's no more Israel now. That's all a load of hogwash as well. Because it's always about Israel all the way through.
Okay, so verse 10. I have confidence in you through the Most High, that ye will be none otherwise minded. Okay. But he that troubleth you shall bear his judgment, whosoever he be. So who is this he? This he, let's go up. What does it say? This persuasion come not of him that calleth you. So who's this persuasion coming from? It's coming from this he. But who is this he? Let's go. I don't want to go there. Y'all can see the last week's video, but in Galatians chapter 3, Galatians chapter 4, it talks about the certain men of the sect of the Pharisees who were teaching the Gentiles and accusing them, saying that they're supposed to be keeping the whole law. All of this is even more evidence to show that after they converted and became believers of the Messiah and started to begin to keep the law, they were still being persecuted. This is persecution. Persecution. But he that troubleth you, but he that persecuteth you, this persecution cometh not of him that called you. They're persecuting them because they don't want them to be involved. They don't want them to be a part of what they have. They're trying to hold salvation and all of these good things to themselves. Right? It says, I have confidence I have confidence in you through the Most High. Why would he tell Gentiles who don't know much about keeping the Torah, that only have the faith, who received it through the gospel that was preached, or through the Holy Spirit? Why would he tell them that he has confidence in them? To tell somebody you got confidence in them is like saying, I know that you have potential. I know that you have potential to do great and wondrous and magnificent things for the kingdom of the Most High.
And hey, let's just get into the etymology of the word confidence. Confidence means to confide, right? To be able to confide, and confide means to be able to trust, right? But if you break down the word confide, it's actually con and fidelity, right? And once again, fidelity is trustworthiness or faithfulness, and con in Spanish is with. So with faithfulness, with trustworthiness, right? So confidence is to be able to have trust, to actually believe that what you're believing is true.
Mm-hmm. And
so
brethren, go ahead.
No. Just saying, the whole confidence, to have confidence is to be able to totally trust implicitly.
I have total and complete and utter trust in you through the Most High. That's saying a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's saying a lot, right? Well, Paul, he doesn't start bodies of believers and then move on and then just leaves them to swim by themselves. He checks back in with them. Mm-hmm. Sometimes he'll revisit them, spend time with them, and re-edify them. And then sometimes he can't physically go back, so he has to write them a letter, right? Hence Paul's epistles. But and I, brethren, if I yet preach circumcision, why do I yet suffer persecution? Then is the offense of the cross ceased.
That's interesting too there, because here Paul is saying that he preaches circumcision. So all these people said, oh, look, he's not about the circumcision. No, he's totally about circumcision after faith. Because you don't want to put the cart before the horse. You don't want to say, oh, just get circumcised and then faith will come later, because it does nothing. He's preaching circumcision. He just says right there, if I yet preach circumcision, right? So he's saying, I'm preaching circumcision. but he's preaching it after the faith has already come, not before.
Yeah, because you're viewing it the way that it was back then as well, you know? Yeah.
He says, I would they were even cut off, which trouble you. So he's saying the people that's troubling them, I would they were even cut off. Like I would have it if I could that they were just cut off. Because we're not supposed to be a stumbling block to somebody else. We're supposed to love each other. We're supposed to edify each other. We're supposed to build one another up. We're not supposed to be a stumbling block. We're not supposed to be the reason why somebody falls astray or falls away from the Most High completely. So the fact that they were being persecuted, the fact that they were being led astray by these individuals, Paul ain't for it at all. Because what does being cut off mean? You can go in the scriptures. You can pull up the whole scriptures as a PDF file, and if you control F and hit cut off and type it in there, you're gonna see some verses that ain't too pretty. To be cut off from your people, to be cut off from a relationship with the Most High, to be cut off meaning to just be physically killed, to be dead, to be beheaded, all of that. Cut off ain't a light word, because this is the importance of Paul's ministry. The grafting in of the Gentiles was an important part of the ministry. If it wasn't an important part, then the Most High wouldn't have brought a revelation to Peter through Cornelius to even open it up and graft them in. Even if it was initially to bring the true Israelites to jealousy, who cares? But once they're grafted in, if you understand the way things is grafted, if you cut off a branch and you graft it in, that means you cut a branch, you leave this open, you insert the new branch, and you tie it around, right? Tight. And then over time, the two become one, and it's just like one branch. So regardless of the reason for the Gentiles being grafted in, that's neither here nor there. But guess what? They're grafted. And now that they're grafted, we need to treat them like we would each other, right? And all of that comes with love. All of that comes with respect, right? They weren't getting that because some of the people were trying to come down hard on them. For brethren, ye have been called unto liberty, only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another, right? But by love serve one another. There's nothing that's been changed. People say the Old Testament was all destroy this, kill that, blow this up, sacrifice this, and it wasn't about
I think the Old Testament
and then the New
was
Testament is all about
prophesizing.
love and love, love, and love. No, they both were. They both were. Right? So
Do you think that the Old Testament was prophesizing the prophesizing Yeshua coming in the future? As all the prophets would prophesize that it was all predicting what would come in the future, like, you know, the Passover and stuff, like in Exodus that was prophesizing the Lamb, what was to come.
Yeah, the entire Torah, all the laws, all of the feast days, everything points to Messiah. And when he came, he was the living, breathing flesh in the flesh. You know, he was, yes, he was, but he was also the word, like John chapter 1, verse 14. It says, and the word, in all caps, the word became flesh and dwelt among us. So he literally came down in physical form as a fleshly form of the Torah.
I mean, it was probably hard for the disciples as well to accept him as being who he said he was at first. You know, this is a man like us going to the toilet and doing all these things, eating. It must have been really hard for the disciples to at first to accept this is the Son of God. This is Yah in the flesh.
Yeah, I would say so, because, you know, I mean, there's so much with the Torah, and to have the Torah, actually the entire Torah put into a physical body, you know what I'm saying? like we have, and then going around and then being able to look at it and all that would be it would definitely be different.
I mean, do you think the disciples even was worried about Paul? Because in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's rumors about them not trusting Paul at a certain time of his ministry.
Yeah, some of them didn't, because, I mean, you got to think also, Paul started off started off persecuting the believers of Messiah. He didn't like them. You know what I'm saying? He was going after them. So yeah, I'd say a lot of them were very leery at first. In fact,
The scriptures say that. I think it's Acts 12, Acts 13. Paul traveled up to Jerusalem to meet with them, and they were like, bruh, like,
yeah, they were like, Paul, you mean the one that was throwing us in prison and stuff?
Yeah,
because he had Roman citizenship as well, didn't he? So he could come and go as he pleases in certain areas.
Yep.
yeah, absolutely.
He had the papers to be able to go from one place to another, where a lot of them didn't. You know.
So going back to what I was saying earlier, it says, "For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." Like I said earlier.
No, and where does that come from? Where does that quote come from? That is Leviticus 19:18 in the Torah.
Go ahead, pull that up.
Pull it up? Okay.
Go ahead, pull that up.
Yep. So Leviticus 19:18. Thou shalt not avenge, nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So right there it says. That is a quote from the Torah. So why would Paul be quoting the Torah if he didn't uphold it, right? And then you also have Messiah's parable of the Good Samaritan, because they asked him, they said, well, who is my neighbor, right? And Samaritans were considered, oh, stay the heck away from them. They're garbage. They're half-breeds, stay away from them, right? But then Messiah used that parable to demonstrate that even people you would consider unkosher, right? Those could also be your neighbor as well,
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely. Sorry, I didn't see any of the chat, so I was just noticing the chat.
Oh, there's stuff in the chat.
Yeah, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of the Most High. Yep, absolutely, sis. Absolutely. But get back into Galatians. Okay. But this word fulfilled, it has a lot more connotation than what you think it does. We covered that last week, but we ain't gonna dwell on this word too much. But we already proved it. This is Torah right here. Paul is quoting Torah. He's talking to Torah, and the whole Torah is fulfilled in one word, but goes back to the Torah. But if ye bite and devour one another, so if you're just going at each other, you know what I'm saying, having discord, take heed that ye be not consumed one of another, right? This I say then, walk in the spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. So how does this happen? How does this matter if you walk in the spirit? Well, the Torah is spiritual, so walking in the Torah is walking in the spirit. That's first. And then if you live a spiritual life, then everything else, the faith, all of that, all of the other good stuff, it pours out of you, right? So you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. Remember Romans chapter 7, he says, for I find another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin, right?
Putting that yoke of bondage.
That yoke of bondage.
And then we also can go to Romans 8:7. Where it says, because the carnal mind is enmity against Elohim, for it is not subject to the law of Elohim, neither indeed can it be. Right? And so, why is the carnal mind at enmity with Elohim? Because it is not subject to the law of Elohim. It's not subject to the Torah. The carnal mind is not going after the Torah. The carnal mind is going after the lust of the flesh, right?
The carnal
do
mind
as
is that
thou
law
will.
of sin.
That's what some people do, doesn't it? The carnal minded man.
Yep.
It's that law of sin, and it says it's warring against the law of his mind, which is the Torah, right? So you guys, and it just goes back to all of this is just a fancy way to say good versus evil. On the most basic fundamental level, good versus evil. If you're doing evil, it's not going to agree with the good. So you want to follow the good and live by good, because if you don't and you let evil creep in, it's going to happen, right? And whoever you choose to serve, the good or the evil, that's who's going to be your master. If you serve the good, which is the Most High, the Messiah, the Torah, righteousness, love for your neighbor, all of that good stuff, then that is going to be who your master is and who controls you, who you are considered under. If you choose the evil, the sinning, the transgression of Torah, the doing all of the bad stuff, the lying, the cheating, the adultery, the fornication, all of that stuff, right? The devil, Satan, demons, all of that stuff, right? That's the bad, and it becomes your master, right? Scripture says you can't serve two masters. You either love one and hate the other, right? You can't serve two masters. So you need to figure out who is going to be your master. For the flesh lusteth against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh, and these are contrary to one another, so that ye cannot do things that ye would. We just said that, right? But if ye be led of the Spirit, ye are not under the law. I'm going to pause here because people can misread this too. If you are of the Spirit, right, having faith through grace and in receiving salvation, ye are not under the law of Moses. No, he's not saying that. And I hope by now, with all of this beating the dead horse, y'all got it from what Paul is actually meaning. But if ye be led of the Spirit, the law is spiritual, you are not under the law of sin, meaning you are not held in captivity to that yoke of bondage that's mentioned up here in verse 1. You don't have that yoke of bondage on you. You are at liberty through Christ, through the Messiah, to be made free. You're relieved, you're delivered from that yoke of bondage, right? It says, now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these. The works of the flesh coincide with the law of sin. All of these things line up with the law of sin. Like I just said, all this is all the bad stuff: adultery, fornication, uncleanliness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like it. So it's not giving you everything. It's just saying, but all of that is the bad stuff, right? Of which I tell you before, as I have told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of heaven. You know what else tells you not to do these things? The Torah. It's right there already.
Yeah,
if you have a foundation of the Torah, you ain't gonna do none of these.
Every one of those is in the Torah, and if you're trying to keep the Torah, you're going to avoid doing those things.
Well, why does he reiterate himself and give you these? Because his ministry is to the individuals who don't have a foundation of the Torah. Paul is a rocket scientist who's used to dealing with other rocket scientists. They know the calculuses and the astrophysics and all of that, right? But now he has a new class who has no background in mathematics at all. So he has to break it down and give it to them on a simple level and reiterate over and over again certain concepts so that they start to understand. Whenever you start a new class, a lot of the times, whether it be mathematics, whether it be science, history, social studies, what is one of the first things that you do when you go into a new class? You cover the terms and definitions, because learning those terms and definitions or being familiar with them helps you understand the rest of the curriculum and the rest of the material. Paul is having to do that with these new converts because a lot of them don't have a background in the Torah. So this is why he has to point out. Then he says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. And people read this and say, see, no law. See, Paul is talking about, no, he's not saying that. It says against such there is no law. You're not going to find anything in the law that's going to speak contrary to the stuff that he's mentioning, because the stuff that he's mentioning is what the law teaches us to do anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So you're either going to be under the law of sin and the bad stuff right here, or you're going to be under the law of the Most High, the law of Moses, which is the good stuff, which is all of this stuff here, right? And they that are Christ's or the Messiah's have crucified the flesh with the affections and lusts. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Like Professor S has been saying all night. You have faith first. You begin there, and out of that faith, you get circumcised. And not only in the flesh, but you circumcise your heart as well. You don't go and get. That's like me saying, if I go get a tattoo that says Bible scholar on my arm, does that make me a Bible scholar? Or is that just a tattoo that says Bible scholar? I have to be a Bible scholar in order to do that, right? Now, we ain't supposed to be getting tattoos, but I'm using that as an analogy. You see what I'm saying? So the spiritual things must be manifested spiritually first, and then they'll manifest in the
That's actually a great analogy, though, bro. That's actually a great analogy because, I mean, the circumcision of the flesh, that's something you do to your flesh. And
exactly. That's why I went there. But
yeah. And a tattoo, I mean, that's something you can do to yourself, but it doesn't mean your heart has actually been changed or that you've actually put in the, it's great analogy, man. Great analogy.
Thank you. Here's another one with the tattoos, right? How many people y'all know got tattoos of crosses, got tattoos of Bible verses, and them people, they wicked as hell. Let's just be real. Let's keep it 100. They got crosses and Bible verses and quotes. You know what I'm saying? Prayer hands and all this other stuff, and they still
and then they got judge not lest you be judged, and all that.
Only God can judge me type of stuff. They just walk around trying to look like Tupac. Trying to look like Tupac. So here's the end of the chapter, right? Let us not be desirous of vain glory, right? Let us not say, hey, we're keeping the Torah. Hey, it's going to give us salvation. Hey,
hey, look, we're better than circumcised.
I've been circumcised, right? No, that's vain glory. That's not what we about. We keep the law because we have faith. We keep the law because we love the Most High. We keep the law because we're following the example of the Messiah. We don't do those things to keep the law, right? It's an outward pouring of love, obedience, and information. It's not inward. If I get all of these things, then I can no. Because I love, because I obey, because I am filled with the Spirit, because I have faith, because I am obedient. These are the things in which I'm doing that are being a physical manifestation of what's already in me.
Mm-hmm.
You feel me? And that's what people miss. That's the mark that people miss. And
because we're supposed to be bringing the kingdom of Elohim out into this world.
Facts. Messiah said, "It's not what you put into your body that defiles you; it's what comes out of your body that defiles you." Think about that. So provoking one another and envying one another. Loving thy neighbor as thyself, not fighting, not being envious, not provoking, being a stumbling block to our brother and to our sister, right? All of these things is what we were commanded not to do. We weren't commanded it in the Old Testament, and we dang sure weren't commanded it in the New Testament, because both testaments are the same. I honestly really don't like the term Old Testament and New Testament. I only reference it because I know that's how people understand them, but it's one. It's not one here and then one here and then you bring them together. No, from Genesis to Revelations, not Genesis to Malachi and the Gospels to Revelation. No, it's all together, right? So you've seen it quoted in Acts. You've seen it quoted in Paul's epistles. They quote the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. Why is he doing that if the Old Testament has no relevance? It has nothing we don't have to do any of that stuff anymore. It don't make any sense. So with that, family, that brings Galatians chapter 5, the study itself, to a close. Now, if you guys want to have discussion, questions, all of that, that's what we'll tackle right now.
I would note a couple of the words here on Here we go. Where it's talking about the idolatry, the witchcraft, hatred, variances. These I would encourage everyone to look up the words. We can look at a couple of them just for the sake of time. But idolatry, worshiping images, right? Witchcraft, pharmakia, medicination, pharmacy. That is, look at this. Medicination. Wait. Yeah, medication. Sorry. Medication, pharmacy. That is by extension, magic, literally or figuratively, sorcery or witchcraft. Right.
Yeah. When you mention pharmakia and witchcraft, that reminds me of like weed and hash and other things that have like potions, even like vaping and stuff like that. Liquids that are targeting children.
Various potions and stuff. Yeah, because I mean, now what's going on with all of these pharmaceuticals, right? Which is where the word comes from, pharmakia. Is they've taken what would ordinarily be a natural substance, and they've manipulated unnatural chemicals into mimicking it, and then combined them. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I would go with that. And what it does is the word also means poisoning, right? If you look at pharmakias, it means a drug that is a spell.
Poisoner.
Yep, poisoner. Mm-hmm. So, and all these things, what they do is they poison the body into doing something that you want it to do for a time, right? And then let's see what else we got. Hatred, enmity, hatred, right? Hostility, variance, quarrels, right? Strife, debates, contention, right? Emulations. You can all see that, right?
Wow.
I'll just pull it up here. Emulations, heat, that is figuratively zeal, in a favorable sense, ardor, in an unfavorable sense, jealousy, as of a husband, figuratively of God, or an enemy, malice, right? So we don't want any of that. All these different things, we can look all in all these, like heresies, for example. What is heresies? Properly a choice that is specifically a party or abstractly disunion. Heresy is a Greek word itself. Heresy, which is a sect, right? Because we dealt a lot with the specific sect that was saying, hey, look, and he's saying right here, we don't want to be involved in all that. You know what I'm saying? Murders, drunkenness, revelings, all of these things, we need to be familiar with what these are, because it's one thing to just read it, but to actually go to the Greek and see what it's saying is a little bit more in depth. And I think it's important that we do that, especially on our own, so that we know for ourselves, because they that do these things will not inherit the kingdom of Elohim. And we want to inherit the kingdom of Elohim. So, yeah.
Facts. Great point. It'll make you think, for sure. It'll definitely make you think.
So something I have, I guess, food for thought. Like in all of this, because we came out of Christianity, so we would say the biggest difference between what we believe today and Christianity comes down to keeping the law. Well, I don't think we would say that, well, if you don't keep the law, then that inherently means that you don't have salvation. I don't think we would say that.
Well,
so
no,
then
because
we go back
no one's ever kept it perfectly anyways, except for Messiah. So, I mean, yeah.
Okay. So then, under Christianity, that idea, you would go down to say, well, what would be the purpose? What's the purpose of keeping the law? If you can have faith and then we can say through it. You also have to have works, but those works really need to be keeping the law. When you go into Galatians 5 and he makes this list of, hey, these are and he says it specifically, these are the things that's going to keep you out of heaven. These are the things that's going to keep you from inheriting the kingdom of God. Now, whether I keep the law or don't keep the law, I can go through this checkbox, right? And I can be like, nope, I don't hear.
He didn't say those were the only things. He said,
Yeah, no, that's what I was about to
such
say.
things.
Yeah, and such as these, as like these. So I'm giving you a few examples, but all of these things plus everything else that's in the law that are told us by the law. Like that's why Paul says in hold on, I'll pull it up. Hold on. I'll pull it up. So okay. What shall we say then? Is the law sin? So is the Torah, because this can't be the law of sin, because if it was the law of sin, it would, he wouldn't have to expound here, right? So is the Torah sin? The Most High forbid. Nay, I had not known sin, but by the Torah. For I had not known lust, except the law had said, or the Torah had said, thou shalt not covet. So what he's saying is, because right here in verse 9, he says, for I was alive without the law once. But when the commandment came, when the Torah came, sin revived and I died. So the Torah makes you aware of what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. Now, choosing to not do what you're supposed to do, that is the transgression. That's where the sin comes in. So I won't say that if you're not keeping the Torah, you can't receive salvation, because some people don't know. But once you're made aware of the Torah and you know that the Torah is what you're supposed to be keeping, and then you make the choice to then go and say, I'm not keeping the Torah for whatever your reason is. Your reason might be, I don't think that the Torah is valid. Your reason might be, I don't think that we were instructed to have to keep the Torah, and you can quote whatever verse you want to quote to try to justify yourself. But once you're made aware, you are now held accountable. Once you're made aware, you are now held to that standard. And so by doing that, that's when you run into issues. That's when it says those people who do this, because if you don't know the Torah, how are you supposed to know what you're not supposed to do according to the Bible? If you're not following the Bible to actually live your life according to it.
Would you say it's not just the Torah that brings to light these things? Do you think the words of Yeshua also brings to light sin in man?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But the words of the Messiah is the Torah. That's the thing.
Right.
You're not gonna
he was always pointing back to the Torah. He was always saying, well, what did Moses say? What's the Torah say? What is it written in the law?
Wow.
Facts. Even his parables, the story, the basically the main idea of his parables was of a Torah-based teaching. Everything was Torah. He lived, breathed, and was the existing Torah in the flesh. So he taught the Torah, he lived the Torah, he did the Torah.
So where does the concept come from that people say that Paul was not keeping the Torah? Then where does that concept come from? Is that just people like misinterpreting the scriptures?
Yes. Damn, you got to go here too, bro.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let's go to 2 Peter.
God, this is a revelation, man. Some of the things that have come out to light tonight are shining bright.
Let's go to Peter.
Yes, that's awesome. That's so awesome.
That's dope. But yeah, that's a good question, and Peter answered it for us. This is the reason why a lot of people either hate Paul's guts and call him a false prophet and false apostle, whatever. And the reason why some people love Paul and use him as the bright, shining knight of this in the Torah. Like both people use this, and this is why they do that. It says, and account that the long suffering of the Most High is salvation. So salvation is the point. Salvation is the key. This is what we're this is the goal, right? Even as our beloved brother Paul, also according to the wisdom given unto him, hath written to you. Where did he write to us from? His epistles, right? And it confirms, I'm not pulling this out my own opinion, guys, as also in all his epistles, some of his epistles, just a few. No, it says all his epistles, speaking in them of these things, in which are some things hard to be understood. But why is some of the things hard to be understood, and who is having a hard time understanding them? That's the question. Like, I think that's number 4 on my list. Ask yourself, why is Paul saying this for his epistles? But you can apply that to Peter here, right? Why is Peter saying this right now? Which they that are unlearned means that you don't know. Unlearned means that you don't have a foundation in, you don't have the understanding, you are ignorant. And unstable. Rest. This word rest here, actually, Professor S highlighted this months and months ago. It means to pervert. So if you are unlearned, if you don't know the Torah, if you don't know what the foundation of what they were talking about, you are unstable. And if you are unlearned and unstable, you pervert what they're saying, as they do also the other scriptures. So not just the epistles alone. If you misinterpret Paul's epistles, guess what? You're going to misinterpret the Gospels. And you're also going to misinterpret the Old Testament. You're going to misinterpret the point behind priesthoods and all of that. What's up, brother?
Yeah, I was going to say, there's something that springs to mind in the scriptures where Paul mentions about certain foods, and some people say, oh, look, we can eat what we want now, you can eat swine and stuff. But Paul wasn't coming from that point of view. You see what I'm saying? We have to view it the way he was back then. Do you see what I'm saying?
Got you. But that's, I didn't say it today, but I said it last week, and I normally do say it. Paul was writing his letters, his epistles, all of the Romans, the Ephesians, Galatians, all of that. Those were originally specific letters written to specific areas, specific churches, to specific people dealing with specific issues. So we go in Romans and we go in Galatians and stuff, and we try to apply it to our lives to make the connection, right? But we try to connect it as if we have the same social constructs of that time. We don't. We have a westernized understanding. The Bible is an easternized understanding. They're not gonna coincide. That's why when you live a biblically set apart life, you don't fit in with the rest of the world. So when Paul was telling them to don't let nobody judge you in meat or drink or in festivals or appointed times, he wasn't telling them you can eat pig, you can keep the feast days or not keep the feast days, can't nobody judge you. No, he was talking to pagans who were newly converts, right? To pagan Gentile people who were newly converts to being believers of the Messiah. And they lived in areas surrounded by pagans who were pressuring them to go back to their pagan ways. So don't let the people. So I'm gonna give you an example. He was talking to the people in Galatia who lived with the natural citizens of Galatia, who worshiped idols, false gods, did sacrifices, ate things that the Torah tells you not to eat. Now that you believe in Messiah, you have the faith, and you're keeping the Torah, you're trying to live your life on the straight and narrow, but your neighbors, your family, people who you see out in the streets, your friends, right, your associates, they're like, why are you not eating this pig? Why are you observing Passover? Why are you observing Feast of Unleavened Bread? Why are you not doing certain things like you used to do? Man, ever since you start following that Messiah dude, man, you've been acting funny. That's pressure. That's peer pressure. They were receiving that, as well as from the certain sect of the Pharisees who was telling them, you're not doing it good enough. You need to keep the whole law or you're not going to be saved. You need to get circumcised. They were under immense amount of pressure. Paul was writing to them to help guide them and alleviate them from what they were dealing with. That's why. And we don't take that into consideration. We just read it like, oh yeah, Paul said this, so this is what we're going to do. No, you got to understand why he said what he said, to whom he said what he said, and what area and time frame in which he said what he said. All of those are key pieces of the context that go missing when you just read something at face value.
Yeah. I mean, didn't the Christians get fed to the lions, and some humans that followed Yeshua were made into candles and stuff like that by Nero? Like, some serious things were going on back then. There was a massive awakening, like some serious people being baptized and stuff like that, you know, following the steps of Yakan, or was it John the Baptist who made the way?
There was massive persecution throughout all around. Still, there's massive persecution today. There are some countries you can't go and profess being a believer in the Most High. You either get locked up or even killed. Some countries. So there's persecution regardless. But to your first question about why is this such an issue? It's because as they do the other scriptures unto their own destruction. So this keys into Marquita's question about, is keeping the Torah a salvational issue? It's not a salvational issue, but it's connection. It's a connection to a salvational issue. And the reason why I say that is because if you don't know, you don't know what you don't know. That's first and foremost. So if you don't know the Torah, how is somebody supposed to expect you to keep the Torah? But once you're made aware of the Torah, its importance and what you're supposed to do, you should want to keep it. You should have it within you. You should want to keep it.
A good example of that, I would say, is, those little New Testament only Bibles that they hand out, right?
Yeah.
If someone got one of those and they received it and they read it like 5 times and read through the whole thing, and they're like, oh man, I love this, and they accept Messiah through that. But they've never got the whole Bible. They just had that one little New Testament. In my opinion, now I'm not the judge or nothing, but in my opinion, I would say if they received it and their heart was circumcised, then yeah, I would say they're good. But if someone gives them the whole Bible and says, hey, here's a whole Bible, why don't you read the whole Bible? And then they say, oh no, I don't want that. Then at that point they've rejected that and said, no, I'm not messing with that. You know what I'm saying?
And the Messiah says, if you reject me, right? And I think he said, you reject me in front of, I'm paraphrasing, you reject me in front of such and such, I'm going to reject you in front of my Father, right? You can't get to the Father without going through the Messiah.
Yeah.
Right? And what the Messiah also said, if you love me, because we have to love the Messiah first. We got to have faith, right? Faith. And from that faith, we follow what we're supposed to do. He says, if you love me, keep my commandments. Well, what is his commandments, first and foremost? Is it just to love God and love each other? No, he said, the Messiah said, that everything that he got, his doctrine, his teachings, his way of life, everything that he got, he received from the one who sent him, from his Father, who is greater than him, right? So if you're saying keep my commandments as the Messiah, your commandments is your Father's commandments. So if you love the Messiah, you will keep the commandments, which include the laws, the statutes, and the commandments. If you love him. And by doing that, it is one, a demonstration of all of your faith and all of your obedience and all of your love. But two, it becomes natural. You want to do it. And when you're in that type of position, if you decide to not follow that, and you're doing it because you're twisting the scriptures, you're perverting the scriptures, you're doing it to your own destruction. And Peter goes on, he says, yet therefore, beloved, seeing ye know these things before, beware lest ye also, being led away with the error of the wicked, fall from your own steadfastness. So he's warning the people whom he's writing to, who are basically doing the right thing. But he's telling them, beware, lest ye also be led away with the error of the wicked. Who is the wicked? These unlearned and unstable rest people who are twisting and perverting the scriptures to their own destruction. He's saying, watch out for them and don't be like them. But then after he says all of these things, that Paul's epistles are hard to understand and everything like that, he goes back and he points to the Messiah. He says, but grow in grace and in the knowledge of the Messiah. To him be the glory both now and forever. But how do you grow in the knowledge of something? You have to study them. How do you get more knowledge of anything? You have to read, you have to study, you have to apply yourself, you have to put energy, effort. You know what I'm saying? You got to put all of that into it. So to grow in grace and in knowledge, you have to do the things that we were instructed to do. I'm sorry, family. There's no way around this. We can try to make as many excuses as we want. We can try to quote these certain specific scriptures out of context all we want. We can come up with these certain doctrines or whatever the churches have been telling us for these last hundreds of years, all we want to justify not keeping the law, but doing so is a reflection of what's within you. If you love the Most High, if you love the Messiah, and you are truly one who is set apart and seeking righteousness, then that is going to be a part of your new lifestyle. And if it's not a part of your new lifestyle, you need to figure out why it's not a part of your new lifestyle and start to make that change. And I'm not saying because you want to be saved. I'm saying because once you do if you actually truly do the things that you proclaim to do, then what the Father put in you will pour out and it will manifest himself in that obedience. We not out here. I don't have a checkbook with the Torah on it, and every day I check it. Did I do the Torah? Did I do Torah? Did I do Torah? No, it's become a part of me, a part of my life. And if I want to continue living this lifestyle, I got to keeping the Torah. It's a part of it.
And
it's not that hard.
We've got to study it daily and meditate in it day and night.
The more you learn about the Torah, the more you learn about the Messiah. The more you learn about the Messiah, the more you learn about the Torah. They're one and the same. If you actually look into his we have a Shabbat talk. I forget which number it was, but it was the name of it was Eye for an Eye and Marriage and Divorce and Remarriage. That episode. And that was a series. We're going to continue it, but that was a series where we go and we read the Messiah's words, where it seems as though he's contradicting the Torah. But when we break it down, you realize, wow, not only is he keeping the Torah, but he's actually teaching the correct way to do it. Which funny, it goes back to when he said, I did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And then when you look at that word fulfill and break it down and see what the true meaning of it is, it means to teach the Torah as it should be taught. And you're like, wow, all of this makes sense.
Wow,
that's crazy. But it's always been there. But we, for whatever reason, whether it's religion, doctrine, brought up, however, whatever.
Do you think that Yeshua taught the Torah orally to his disciples, but to the masses he taught in parables because they couldn't understand it the way that he was trying to explain it to the disciples?
Well, whenever he dealt with the masses, especially the people that was coming against him to question him, right, to try to expose him, right, he always pointed to Moses. What does Moses say? What does the law of Moses say? What does Moses speak on this particular matter? Then when he spoke to his disciples, he taught them in parables because he wanted them to truly get the deeper meaning, the deeper understanding. Remember what he told to Nicodemus. He said, how can I teach you of heavenly things when you can't even understand earthly things? Because the Messiah operated on a different wavelength. He was always looking up. My old mentor, Dave Nickerson, he says, we should never be looking out. We should be looking up, right? So looking up is understanding the deeper meaning, applying yourself, studying, doing all of the things that is going to give you that deeper understanding of the scriptures, which will in turn give you a deeper and more close relationship with the Father. But if you're looking out, you're worried about, the worldly stuff, right? And even in biblical terms, you're reading the scriptures verbatim as they are written, and you're not digging underneath that. That's all looking out. You need to be looking up.
Okay, yeah. Wow, that's good. Very good.
These questions need to be asked every time you read any script. Who is talking? Author. Who are they talking to? What were they talking about? Context. What was the setting? What was going on in the culture of who was being talked to? People are not asking these questions about every scripture, but instead they apply the scripture to their current situation or to this current culture. You cannot do that without committing the same sin the Satan did, which was blasphemy. So these questions, I remember getting these questions back when I was first like diving into a deeper understanding of the scriptures. That is 100% correct. You have to ask those questions, because if you don't, you're not really going to understand what you're reading. You're going to think so, right? The pastor might have preached on it one Sunday and only quoted 2 of them in that whole hour sermon, right? You might think so, but you have to ask those questions every time you read. But yes, we have to understand the Bible was written with an Eastern understanding. We live in a Western understanding. You can't apply Western principles and constructs to an Eastern understanding. It's just not going to work. That's why certain things you read in the Bible might not sit well with you, right? It might not sit well with you, the absolute annihilation of a whole nation of people, right? That's mass genocide, right? We in the Western civilization, we talk about the Holocaust all the time, right? But when you understand it from an Eastern perspective and why, right? Who was he talking to? The author, well, the Most High told them to go and kill everybody. Okay, so the author is the Most High, right? Who were they talking to? They was communicating back and forth. What were they talking about? And what was the context? The context was for the preservation of Israel to not lose itself and be caught up in paganism and idolatry and all of these other sinful acts, right? For them to be preserved, so that through the preservation of Israel, the priesthood, which was established through Melchizedek initially and had to be transferred to the Levitical priesthood, will be restored by Melchizedek through the Messiah. And from all the way from Genesis with the apple and the serpent, everything will be restored to its fullness by Messiah. That's why the preservation of Israel was the utmost importance. But you're not going to understand that if you're not digging deeper. You got to
and see, even that, it sounds terrible to most people to read that. But without that, then Messiah could not have come. And if Messiah hadn't come, then everyone would be lost anyways. So it was actually an act of mercy all along. Yeah.
Like I tell you, this might sound a little selfish to most people, or it might sound weird. But when you read about the pain and the agony that the Messiah was put in, right? You go, oh man, when I think about all of that stuff, man, I don't want him to go through that. And I wouldn't even want to have to go through that, right? That's kind of the reaction we give. But based on what that led to and why he did it, what was the purpose, what he was fulfilling, and all of the massive things that he was shifting and putting into place for our eternal salvation. Yes, I'm happy that he did that. I'm absolutely happy. Every blow that he took, every drop of blood that he spilled, every bone that was broken, everything, every nail that went through each hand or wrist, whatever your understanding is, whether it was a cross or a tree, whatever your understanding is, all of that pain, all of that agony, the crown of thorns on his head, everything, it was necessary for the salvation of each and every one of you, including yourself. So I'm happy that all of that happened.
And it's like Chuck Missler says, most people think of that as a tragedy, but it was actually an achievement.
Celebrate. And we celebrate those things by showing him that his sacrifice wasn't in vain. Every time you willingly sin, every time you do what you're not supposed to do, and then not supposed to do is taught to you by the Torah. Whether or not you keep the Torah, right? You might not keep the Torah. You might come from a Christian background or whatever. When you're doing the right and correct thing according to the Bible, you're still in adherence with the Torah. So you're following the Torah whether you actually want to or not. So you just need to make the decision to consciously follow it, right? But when you are doing those things and you're keeping the Torah and you're doing what you're supposed to do, you are celebrating that sacrifice that the Messiah made. Because why would he go and sacrifice himself and do all of these things for people who aren't even going to follow the example that he set forth? It makes the Messiah, and I think Paul even mentions this. I think he says it makes his sacrifice of null effect, right? What are we doing? What are we doing? And the only reason why we even make a big deal about the law and the Torah and stuff like that is because so many people dismiss the law. And once you understand the law, it opens the door for so many other things in your life that can change things and give you so much of a deeper understanding in a relationship with the Messiah and with the Most High. We're not just law. Like, you can go up and down my YouTube channel and see all of the various topics that we discuss. And the Torah isn't even the number one topic discussed, to be honest. But it's important that you get this, because if you don't get this, how are you going to get these other things? Right? If you're a mechanic and you're supposed to learn how to fix cars, if you don't know how to turn a wrench, how are you supposed to do anything on a car? If you can't turn a wrench, if you can't twist a screw, if you don't know how to hammer something in, the very basics, if you can't do that, how are you supposed to fix a car? How are you supposed to build a house? Yeah, that's all I got, family. Any more questions? Any more? We out here. I'm ready.
I mean, you said about faith, yeah, comes by hearing the word of Yah, yeah. And so, how can we like keep the Torah and like it says like not to walk by faith, no, to walk by faith and not by sight, but faith without works is dead. So the Torah, once you realize and understand that it reveals sin in your life, and that we exposes the wretched man, that sin equals death, but we must live according to the truth, which is the law of Moses, or the Torah, which is Yah's instruction, isn't it? And commands, and those who love him will keep his commandments and his instruction. Once you recognize, and it's revealed to you through the Spirit, the Ruach, you know.
Absolutely.
How would you guide someone to like Galatians, and going through what you're going through, these topics, and that will help enable others to recognize and see the things that some people may not see?
Well, so what I would say with
Absolutely.
that, as far as the faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of the Most High, right? So,
Yep.
Whenever you learn something new from the Torah that you never quite comprehended before, and then you see that it is that Messiah fulfilled that in a very specific and very precise way, it actually builds your faith, right? So as you study the Torah and compare it with Messiah, it builds your faith even more, and your faith becomes stronger and stronger, because then you realize, hey, there's no way this could just be by coincidence or chance, right? It just causes
Divine, it's done by divine inspiration. It's amazing what you say. It confirms it's what Akin was saying. The Old Testament and the New Testament it's one. It's one and the same. All it is that the Word became flesh, and then obviously the virgin birth and Yeshua becoming a man on the earth is keep fulfilling the law. Like he said, I've come to fulfill the law. You know, I've not come to abolish it. I've come to fulfill it, and I'll bring a sword. You know, because people didn't like what he said, and when he flipped the tables, the money lenders, and set the animals free, he goes, you know, you're using my father's temple in the way that I did not want. You know, it's deep. It's amazing. It's everything is prophecy coming into tuition. It's fulfilled, and it's just the second coming now, isn't it? Yet to be fulfilled, the Messiah coming back.
Absolutely. What I would say, and this is just advice, since your question was like, what advice would we give, right? A lot of us, coming from whether it's Christianity, being an atheist, some other religion, right? We don't have a background in the Torah. So if you're looking at it from a Torah perspective of understanding, we are Gentiles, right? We don't have that basic understanding. So you got to start somewhere. So I recommend, and this just is me, this ain't the scriptures talking or anything. I recommend reading the Torah from Genesis to Deuteronomy all the way through. Take notes. Take your time. It don't matter if it takes you a year. Take your time, right? Read it, absorb it. Then go and read the Gospels. Then come back and read the Torah, and then read the Gospels. And once you go through this back and forth, right, then you begin to branch off and read the Torah, read the various king books, read the various prophet books, and then you can read the various, your Actses, your Paul's epistles, your Peters, your Jameses, your Jews, your Revelation. And then you're going to see that based off of everything that you've been reading and gaining an understanding of, you now have a full picture. Because if you were just given the New Testament like I was, the first book I was given by my mentor, he said, you should read the book of John. It's a really great place to start, right? And I know wholeheartedly he had good intentions. And if you're talking about understanding Messiah, it is a good place to start. However, it's only a good place to start if you already have a firm foundation of the Torah, because you're not going to fully understand what the Messiah is doing and his significance if you don't know who he is. And he is Torah, and Torah is he. So having that contrast, read the Torah, read the Gospels, read the Torah, read the Gospels, branch off, hit some of the books inside, right? Get the history of Israel, understand the importance of Israel, understand the significance of Israel, understanding the covenants and the priesthoods, right? It all goes together. But to start, if you don't have any background, you don't even know, you can't even quote one law from the Torah, that's fine. When Paul spoke his ministry to these new Gentile converts, he gave them 4 things to follow, right? You can start there. Start with what Paul said, right? The 4 things. And then from there, what they were supposed to do, go to the synagogue every Sabbath and hear the law spoken, right? So the equivalent of that could be, if you know somebody who's a Torah observer, attach yourself to them. Find out what they're doing. YouTube University. There's so many different YouTube channels of people who are keeping the Torah or teaching the Torah. Go into them and get a little bit better understanding. Obviously, be careful because you don't want to follow a false teacher, right? We have a Shabbat talk show every week. And you're going to get some Torah in some kind of way. You know what I mean? Like, find something that works for you, because not everybody works for everybody. Find something that works for you that'll help you grow each and every day. The goal isn't for perfection right away. You got to walk before you run. You got to crawl before you walk. So follow the example that we are given in this book right here. Because I'm going to show y'all a visual representation. I'm going to go from... All right, so check this out. This side is the Old Testament. It contains the Torah and a bunch of other good stuff. This right here is the New Testament. And this actually has paperwork that I have in here that's kind of thick. So I'm going to take this out because it's adding to the thickness. People are telling you to focus on this and forget all of this. Do you see the comparison? And majority of this is Paul's writings. If you take out the Gospels, Peter, Jude, and Revelations, and maybe like 1 or 2 other books, the rest of this is Paul's writings. And we already just read about how you can misinterpret Paul's writings and how they're hard to be understood if you don't have a firm understanding of this. And the reason why my Bible falls apart like this is because I use the mess out of it. But you can't ignore all of this right here and just focus on this and think that by reading this and focusing on this, you're going to have the full understanding, because the information that's in this came from this.
Do you find sometimes keeping the feast days can be a struggle for some people that are new to it as well? Because like that's all part of Torah as well, is it not? For example, you got like soon we've got Day of Atonement coming, which is in September, and then you got like Feast of Trumpets and Feast of Tabernacles, where we go in the tent for 7 days, and like obviously Feast of Unleavened Bread. You got your first fruits when the wheat would be in accordance to, the first fruits. Then you got Pentecost, but some people think that Pentecost is not the true day. Like if you count 104 days when the wheat is being harvested, that's the true amount of time from the day of Passover up until like the true Pentecost, or it's not even Pentecost. I think that something got mixed up there. Do you understand what I'm saying, or not? What I'm trying to describe to you?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's not hard. It's not hard. It's not difficult. If you can keep Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, Valentine's Day, Father's Day, Mother's Day, all of these pagan holidays, you can keep the feast days.
Come on now. Now you
Go ahead, sis. Talk your ish, sis. Go ahead, sis. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that hard, bro.
Get rid of Halloween.
I mean, but Alan, I would say, just give a different answer to that, because you said for people who are new, and by society's definition of hard, yes, it's going to be hard because we don't know. Like, essentially, like you said, Arkin, we are in the seat of Gentiles now. We're kind of trying to get this stuff back while still being in the land of Canaan, so to speak, the initial land of Canaan, before the Hebrews took it over, right? Like, we had to live among the Hebrews, had to live among all of the pagans. So here we are trying to be gathered back out of paganism ourselves. We really don't know. We're just trying to learn the times. Heck, we still have to battle, like Paul, within our members. We have to battle with the fact that, wait a minute, God's timing even is outside of what America's time is. Hell, America got their own timeline. Forget Gregorian. Like, and so we got to battle with all of that. We're just kind of learning this stuff. But when you have that heart, so the faith gets you in the door. When you have the heart, when you read in the Old Testament, that tells you the character of God. This is what sickens me sometimes about the church, in that you don't need the Old Testament. You're not going to know God. You know, the Old Testament tells you the character of God. And understanding the Old Testament will teach you how to hear from God. Right? You're always told, oh yeah, hear from God, and it's a still small voice. Yeah, but when you don't read the character of God, you really you don't know if it's your voice or Satan's voice or God's voice. So learning all of that in the beginning is going to be hard, but when you have that faith, you know, and wanting to, that's easy. That's when it becomes easy.
Well, the feast days are also referred to. The word in Hebrew, I believe, means a rehearsal, right? Because they're all essentially rehearsals for. They all originally were, and some of them still are, rehearsals for future events, right? So when you look at it in that aspect, a rehearsal is each time you rehearse something, you get better than the time you did it before, right? Each time you do it better, and eventually what you want to do is get to the point where when the actual event takes place, you know what place you're in, what role you're supposed to be playing, where you're supposed to go, and all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you know, it's not necessarily about doing them perfect, especially in the beginning. It's just try, because it's a rehearsal. You're trying to get better and better and better each time, right?
Yeah. Like, we're supposed to blow the shofar, right? On Feast of Trumpets and on the Moon Day, right?
Yeah.
For some people, learning how to blow a shofar is fairly easy. For other people, not so much.
You still ain't able to do it?
Bruh, I be in that
can't do it
bathroom blowing until I'm blue in the face. I'm telling you. I might get a fart here and there. Then, look, check this out. So when I started to, I got my shofar. I was getting ready for...
Yeah, it's hard, man.
I want to see it.
Yeah. So I'm over here practicing, and I'm trying to get it done, right? I'm trying to get it, and I'm practicing for like an hour straight, and then I get like one little blurb. It was like, right? I was like, oh, I did it. And then my wife comes down and is like, oh, what's that? I said, oh, it's a shofar, you know, that I'm telling her about it. She's like, okay, can I see it? Can I try? I was like, yeah, there you go. And she just blows, and it's perfect, and it's pristine.
Oh, wow.
So, it's hard for some people, it's easy for some people.
May one of that.
This is why I say keeping the feast isn't really hard. And the reason why I say that is I don't mean like hard and difficulty. I mean, is it doable? Like if you take somebody from the Middle Eastern who never heard of American culture, never heard of holidays or anything, you bring them to America, and then they say, what are you guys doing this? What celebration are you doing right now? And they tell them, oh, we're celebrating Christmas. Okay, so what is Christmas about? And then they're trying to explain to them the essence of what Christmas is, right? And we know Christmas pagan and the evil stuff, but I ain't talking about that right now. I'm just talking about what they say, right? The giving, the spirit of giving, and all of that good stuff, right? So they're trying to explain to them what the essence of Christmas truly means. And then they're saying, oh, well, you have to give gifts. And then there's a mistletoe. And then you've got to get a tree. You got to decorate the tree. You got to do all of these things. They probably looking at it like, bruh, that's too much. And so one Christmas, they might not have a tree. They might not do the mistletoe, but they might give a gift. And then the next year, they might have a tree and give a gift, but no mistletoe. You see what I'm saying? And that's what Professor S was explaining. It's a rehearsal. My first Passover, I literally went to the store and bought pre-made lamb and ate the lamb and read my Bible, praise and worship, went to sleep. Right? And then it just grows and evolves over the years, right? So you don't have to be an expert, but just giving that effort, right? If that individual from the Middle East just started somewhere with Christmas. I'm not advocating for the observance of Christmas, y'all. Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. Like, you have to start somewhere. And it's not that difficult. It's not that difficult.
And it can be fun with children as well. Like I've got my son and my daughter, we was rehearsing Passover and putting olive oil on the doorposts. We plead the blood of Yeshua HaMashiach on the olive oil to sanctify and set it apart. And then we would put that on the doorposts, and I would have my staff, and I would make the fire, and I'll put the lamb in the fire and stuff. And it can be a fun thing. But also, my experience that I can remember is being a bit worried that I've done it incorrectly. But it's like what Professor said, like just you got to go to flow and just try and like you said, practice, and it will get better. And that the Holy Spirit, she will guide you. She will reveal things to you. The Ruach will guide you. She's a comforter and a helper.
Yep. And each time, each time you'll realize, hey, last year I didn't do it like this, but I read it this year, so this year I'm going to do it that way. You know what I'm saying? And it gets better over time with every rehearsal. Like so, it's not. I mean, we should endeavor to do it perfectly, right? But whenever we realize, hey, last year I didn't do this right, you shouldn't beat yourself up over it. Just say, well, this year I'm going to do it correctly. You know what I'm saying?
You know why? You know why that makes sense? You know why we're able and given the freedom and the liberty to do that? Because we're given grace. Exactly, my sister.
Hallelujah.
Grace.
All glory to Yah in Yeshua's name. Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? We are giving grace. The Gentiles that Paul preached to and he was writing letters to, they were given grace. We are given grace. But grace is not an excuse to willfully sin, willfully transgress the law. So while you're figuring out your life to try to live righteously, you're giving grace to cover you. But grace isn't going to continue to cover you for you to just blatantly do whatever you want to do, contrary to the holy instructions that were given to you by the Most High, by the Messiah, and all of their various appointed prophets and leaders and teachers. That's where grace does not abound.
No.
Kind of. But, is it? Would you say that grace? If people like start to understand what you've been teaching in the message tonight with the group, yeah, and people start to understand certain things, but they continue in smoking weed or continue in their sin and don't let the Holy Spirit dwell within their tabernacle and start to change them, because that's what it's about. It's about becoming a changed person. The old man, the inner man starts to change from that. You see the old man going off. You used to drink alcohol. You used to smoke weed, but you feel a bit sad because you're going to miss You know, but then the Holy Spirit says, don't be sad because I'm going to fill you and I'm going to guide you, and then you can have a relationship with the Father through Yeshua. And that's the most amazing thing that man could ever have on this earth. Could it be?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a process. And through the Messiah, you are made a new creature. You are made a new man.
Hallelujah.
That old man is, it said, what Galatians, not Galatians. No, Galatians 2, I believe. Galatians 2 and Romans 6. It says that old man was crucified with Messiah. So through his crucifixion and resurrection, you are now resurrected and you are new within the Messiah.
New creature, yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exactly what we do. You know what I'm saying? So
wow.
I know we're getting late. So sis, I know this whole time somebody had some kind of question, some kind of comment. Let me hear somebody over there that maybe got a question or something, because
he's tired of hearing from me. So y'all need to comment.
If you got a question,
He wants y'all to have something to say.
To bring up something, you know, and even if it's not a question or anything, you know, what did you think about the information that was brought out tonight? In your opinion.
What is Mr. Sims? All right. I enjoyed the lesson, the study, and hearing it again. I've come out of Christianity, and like I was telling my friend Marquita, I was inundated with Jesus for 60-something years.
Gotcha.
And coming out, it's like this is my first year of life.
Yeah.
So real life is my first year. So it's totally different because I'm hearing the truth and not just something somebody's saying because they don't know the truth and they haven't studied to find the truth.
Absolutely, brother. So let me give you some advice, because I've had to I've counseled a couple brothers, and some of the brothers were a lot older than me, and they felt like, and I don't know if you having this issue, but sometimes you could feel like with the amount of life experience you have and how long you've been in the ministry, right, that you should be at a certain level of understanding. And if you're not where you think you should be, it's kind of like a bummer, right? But it's better to have 60-something years of false doctrine washed away and 2 months of learning truth than to have it the other way. Having, you know, all of this knowledge and wisdom and understanding, but if it's not the truth of the Bible, it you know what I mean? And not to say that everything you learned in your 60-something years was wrong, because there is truth in Christianity. There's a lot of I grew a lot in Christianity. I'm 32 now. I spent over 10 years heavy in the ministry, and there was things within that 10-year time period that I learned a lot from, right? But I give thanks and praise to the Most High for all of the new information that He's given me and bringing me out of those false doctrines. And now I can help other people and share that with other people. So as you go, brother, you a year in, you on your way. You see what I'm saying? You on your way, brother. Don't ever feel like, man, I might be the elder in the group. You know what I'm saying? You know, no, it ain't like that. Because I come from the military. Me and Marquita served together, and I went on a deployment. And we were in Qatar, and the night shift supervisor came in and was like, "All right, I'm about to introduce y'all to this new guy, right?" So he comes in, and he was a tech sergeant, so his rank was E6, right? So he outranked all of us because we was E2s, E3s, and E4s.
Okay.
So he came in, and he didn't even have an Air Force background. He just came to the Air Force. He was a reservist. And he had a background of the Marines.
Okay.
Right. So we not only first for our job, right, you had to know the foundations of being in the Air Force. Then on top of the Air Force, then you had to learn the basics of our job. And then you can go into like the more specific parts of our job, which was logistics. So we were loading planes and all this stuff, all this other stuff, right?
Right.
He didn't know none of that. But he came in and he was like, okay, so I'm going to be the night shift supervisor, and I'm going to be real with y'all. I don't know none of this. Y'all are the subject matter experts. I'm going to let y'all do y'all thing. I'm going to work with each and every one of you, and you guys are going to teach me. And I guarantee you, I'm going to work hard, and I'm not going to, you know, he's not going to be like that type of dude that be just barking orders and all of that. And we appreciate it. He worked with us. We taught him what we knew. And before, he was doing the work with us as if he was one of us, right? And he never, not once, made us feel like, you know what I'm saying, he was just barking orders when we was looking like, man, this dude don't know what he even talking about. He don't even know the job. But he learned the job. Right. He was older than us. He had more rank than us and more life experience than us, but he came down in a humble manner. He learned the job and he got it done. Same thing with the scriptures. Same thing with the scriptures. Somebody could be in the truth, right, for 30 years and still not grow as much as they should. Then somebody can be in the truth for 6 years and absorb everything, be teachable, be coachable, learn it all. And then they might exceed, they might pass that person up. So age don't matter, experience don't matter, none of that matters. All that matters is that you have a heart to serve and learn and share that information with other people when you get it.
Right.
So
appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, brother.
All right.
No problem. Y'all more than welcome to come on every time we out here. And you're more than welcome to check out any of the other previous shows that we did too as well.
All right.
All praise.
You know, I'm looking at you.
I don't think he heard you.
You give us some. Yeah.
It was enlightening, man. I appreciate it. You know, I enjoyed it. Got a lot out of it. Changed my perspective a lot. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All praises. All praises.
Right on, man. Right on.
Well, sis, I appreciate you for sharing the word, spread the word, and bringing people on here. We do appreciate it. I appreciate everybody who is here on the panel and for coming out. For those of you guys who are going to be watching at home, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you like the content, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if nobody has anything else, may the Most High bless you, keep you, campus angels around you, and show you favor. And with that said, family, Shabbat Shalom. Y'all take it easy now.
I want all the smoke. You don't want the smoke on it. You don't want the smoke on it. You don't want the smoke on it. I want all the smoke. You don't want the smoke on it. You don't want the smoke on it. You don't want the smoke on it. I want all the smoke. You don't want the smoke on it. You don't want the smoke on it. You don't want the smoke on it. I want all the smoke. I came in with no fans. It was me and my music. The most high was in my lyrics to discern how I use it. It began with 32, then that sweet 16. I paddle round, knocked around, cooking sweet